of Turfloop Graduate School of Leadership, known to many as TGSL, for this leadership and sustainability dialogue. Those who follow the dialogues, you will remember that we had the other one where we had Ntate Mohale. We are also going to have another one in August. So this is series of leadership and sustainability dialogue, and the way they are marrying leadership and sustainability, I'm sure you would know that one cannot do without the other. But before we start with the program and all the other proceedings, I would like us to observe and open with the national anthems too. We'll have first, as per protocol, the African Union, and then it will immediately be followed by Nkosi Sigelela, the South African national anthem. If we could kindly take it to our feet to observe the national anthems as we begin this program. Thank you very much.
To rise together.
Thank you very, very, very much. Mr. Convener, I think because we have a database of all in attendance, we should send them the lyrics of the African Union anthem. The tempo between the two, yeah, huge margins, the difference, which means they do not know the African Union. So they know the child and not the mother. And Africa, as a parent, she will not be happy. So let us make it our task that we send, let us unite and celebrate so that they read through the lyrics. Next time in the next symposium, I will see them sing along. And in 1963, when nations of Africa united, they had foreseen that the cheese from Africa has been misplaced. And they wanted to form a union that would talk about the security of the country, would talk about how to trade with one another, how to move goods, how to support one another. But today, we are still at a crossroad, trying to figure it out where our cheese is. I'll tell you a short story of two mice. They used to live in a maze, and there was a cheese every day. They would wake up in the morning, go around the maze, know from which corner to find their cheese. They would do that from time to time. And as they kept eating the cheese, the quantity, the supply kept reducing, until one morning, one mouse went ahead and realized the cheese is no longer there, and decided to say, hey, I'll try again tomorrow. Went again tomorrow, the cheese was no longer there. And then the other one said, no, whoever was putting the cheese in that corner will probably come again and put more cheese. Maybe it's just the demand is too much. That is why our supply is inconsistent. And then one decided to go out of the maze, try to go out and fend to look for something to eat because the cheese was no longer there. The other one remained in the maze, kept zigzagging the maze, trying every corner to find the cheese. The cheese was no longer there until it died. There was no food. And the question that it asked before it died was, who moved my cheese? And it kept asking the same question. That mouse, who moved my cheese? The other one went out of the maze to look for greener pastures. And I believe the African Union, the coming together of African states, was the realization that the cheese has been moved. That we are plagued by huge margins of unemployment, as a population which has so many young people, which is the future of the country. And if the employment is so high among this group of the citizens, it means we are headed for trouble. And I think the theme meticulously captures this because it realizes that a lot of things come into play. The polycrisis, if you talk about it, you have got a series of issues that affect one another that makes it so difficult to solve the challenges that we have. And if you were to look at the politics and where to start, then I think leadership might be where to start. And I look at the theme that is a leadership and sustainability. After you answer the leadership question, and then you would say, as leaders, how then do we sustain the progress that we are trying to make? How do we bring together state resources? How do we solve the immediate challenges that we experience in our communities? So I think it's very important that we contribute meaningfully to this session. And the theme of African cultural economy and business opportunities in the context of current global conflicts tries to marry a lot of things that will need each expert to come in and dissect. And if you try now to look at the cultural economy of Africa, then you realize that the GDP contribution, you look at the numbers, you realize that the very same people who actually contribute so much to the GDP are neglected in terms of our progressive policies. So, and when I see the experts in the room, I believe we'll come together and try to think of concrete measures. Let me acknowledge your presence, all of you. The Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Limpopo, Dr. Jeffrey Mabelebele in absentia, the Deputy Vice Chancellorship, especially here we have got for teaching and learning, Professor Richard Madaje, Professor Mutiba in absentia, the Executive Management Committee members who are here. I see the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Management and Law, our host, Professor Umpimezi Sibanda. I also see the Professor Sidati, the Faculty Research Professor, our host, our immediate host, Professor SIPHO Mukwena, the director of the Turfloop School of Graduate School of Leadership, also directors of school who are here, heads of department, program managers from the school. You are acknowledged. Let me also take this opportunity to acknowledge our important stakeholders. Batlhaloga re a le bona ba kwena ba moshate wa rena wa gamoletši re a le bona ka tshwanelo nka se fitlishe madume a ka se fihle bjalo ke re ba goma mfitlishe madume ka moshate, that we as University of Limpopo acknowledge their presence, because the work that we do taps into the activities, the progress that we want to see in our communities. And ge re bona ba moshate re a tseba gore e ra gore ba tla kgona go fela ba engage le rena bjalo ka university, ba re thušeng ka research, ba re go tla mmolo o moswa ka kua moletši, re thušeng gore na sustainability le bolang ka yona le leadership re dira eng gore mmolo la rena o kgone go tlhabolola setšhaba bjalo le bjalo. Ga se batla ka phošo le ba memile ka go tseba gore together we have a role that we can play. The list is long. I will in between just come back and acknowledge more so that I get you the first 30 minutes ki acknowledge by the time re ba le official opening about already schedule but we do have our ablution facilities as you exit this point, and then later the ashara there to the left, the ablution facilities are there. But the Limpopo Economic Development Agency, we recognize you, Office of the Premier, represented by Dr. Malindi. We also have Mr. Musomani, we have Dr. Mukhokong from the office as well, and Mr. Pasha from RICO. We also acknowledge your presence. Mr. Bulanga from SABC, Ms. Rapaza from Standard Bank. We have Ms. Rangkoko from Chokwe Primary School. We have Dr. Letsoalo from Lidet as well. Bakadi Fukengi, Dr. Moloto, Renale Morena Moloto. Kapolokwani Municipality, Renale Morena Kabe. The headman, Yakamushate, the Muleji Traditional Tribal Council, Renale Ntatematlo, and Renale Misinkoveni from the Jewelry Business Incubator of Limpopo. Rape from leader, Renale Miss Patela. Ba etile peleke from the Organizational Development Office, Ms. Zenzile Mutetwa. Really acknowledge that, and we appreciate your presence. I see students in your numbers. I see the academic staff, the support staff of the University of Limpopo. You are all welcome to this beautiful session. Let's get the program started. I'm going to invite to give us opening remarks Professor Sipho Mokoena, who's the director of the Turfloop Graduate School of Leadership in the Faculty of Management and Law. Let's encourage him as he comes to the stage.
Good morning, Africa and friends of Africa. What a joy to be here with all of you. Program Director, I will stand on the protocol that you have already set for interest of time so that we may have actually fruitful engagements. However, to acknowledge the executive of the university will be proper, and also Bamushate, and even the guest. In my case, I go straight to the speaker, but will be introduced accordingly, the moderator, as well as the panelist. There is a famous African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If I look at this famous African proverb, I have no doubt that this Africa Month, we are determined to go far. We are not looking for quick fixes or short-term glory on challenges confronting the continent. We are building a sustainable future through the two most powerful tools we have. Strong leadership, that's the first one. And the second one is honest dialogue. I know if J.J. Tabane was here, we'll say, let's talk frankly. A dialogue may happen, but is that a frankly dialogue? Is it an honest dialogue? It is only if we have sustainable dialogues like this one that the youth will be ready to lead tomorrow. And we will have actually provided frameworks and models or solution to a certain extent to some of the challenges that are confronting us in the continent. The global icon, the late Dr. Nelson Mandela, taught us that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I think already you actually put a challenge around that as a program director. So in this case, sustainability is not a destination. It is a continuous climb. And we cannot make that climb in silence. We need platforms like this one to engage, to be critical, to utilize scientific researches to develop frameworks and solutions. So today, let us commit to speaking openly, listening deeply, and leading with our communities in mind. Mine was not to give a speech per se, and taking over from the guest speaker, but was to officially open this dialogue. Let the dialogue begin, and happy Africa Month. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opening remarks, Prof. Mokoena. And frankly speaking, one wonders when we talk about the polycrisis and you look at what can actually be the issue. But out of all issues, hunger, you look at the water crisis that we have across the continent, you look at how the geopolitics, how one nation bombards another, and then another miles away experience fuel hikes, and you realize that we've got a deeper issue here. But for me, of interest is state security. That I saw His Excellency opening a bridge together with Lesotho, and it was supposed to be a pipeline for water provision. You know, we import water from Lesotho in the main. And I got shivers down my spine that if one country, they targeted a bridge to cut off connection, to cut off service delivery, to cut off everything else, and it affected food prices and everything, that if one day they were to bombard that bridge that they just opened, what would happen? It means we will not have water at all. And then you try to think of where our problems are coming from, and one can only say, hey, re matate. But let me invite Professor Richard Madaje, who's the DVC for Teaching and Learning, to come and give us a welcome address. Let's appreciate him as he comes.
Ntate Morerwa, thanks very much for this opportunity. The Vice Chancellor and Principal, Dr. Mabilibile in absentia, Professor Sibanda, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Management and Law, Directors of School in the Faculty of Management and Law, Professors, starting with Prof. Mokoena, who is our host for today's function, and other directors of school, if they are present here. Thank you very much. Advocate Rapatsa, Professor Koma, Mr. Muchambisi, and of course, our honorable guest, Advocate Mantula, the keynote speaker for the day from Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs, UNISA, the moderator, Ms. Matlangu, from Channel Africa, the panelists, Professor Nwake, Dr. Mudluli, Ms. Masango, academics in our midst in their various capacities, heads of department, professors, senior lecturers and lecturers, support staff, assistant registrars and principal admin officers, the media, and I see today we have Ntate Victor Homeswana, Executive Director of Marketing and Communication at our university, and of course our very important stakeholder, our royalty in our midst, Bataloha, from Mulechi, in order not to commit a mistake, I will simply say we also acknowledge all of them. And our Black Bull will pass our regards to them. I'm also from royalty, so I know how it is done. I don't want to be fined, but we highly appreciate their presence. And of course, we have colleagues from LEADER, the Premier's Office, Polokwane Municipality, and many others that I may not mention by name. Don't feel offended, please. We do recognize you, and we see you. In my mother tongue, I will say, Recover Bona. And in Xitsonga, of course, we are going to say, Hamibona. And in Northern Sotho, Sepedi, we will say, Rialibona. Professor Sitati is seated close to me. If I don't mention him, I'm going to be in big trouble. And a very important stakeholder in our midst, the students. At whatever level, we highly appreciate your presence because you are the future. Some of us soon will be off the stage, and you'll be the ones who are running this country. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Tobel, Ndimacheloni, Abusheni, Ntate Murerwa, you are a very good teacher. And we are highly impressed by their response. Sanbonani, I have to continue. Molo. Oi. Very impressive. Now I'll go to Central Africa. Muribwanji. We have people who know Nyanja. I'm highly impressed. I'm highly impressed indeed. But on a serious note, I'm using these greeting expressions for a good purpose, because we are celebrating Africa as a continent, as our motherland, as it were. Some of you might have listened to Bob Marley, Peter Tosh. They do sing about Africa. And I'm using these various languages to impress the fact that we might speak different languages, but it does not mean we are different. We are one. Unfortunately, some people use these different languages to undermine other Africans. But the issue is, these languages, all of them, are our heritage, and we should be very proud of these languages. We should never undermine each other because of us speaking different languages. Ntate Murerwa, on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Mabilibile, and the university at large, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all the dignitaries, academics, support staff, our guests, our royalty, our municipality officials, to this apt dialogue titled Leadership and Sustainability Dialogue, Africa Month Celebration. A special word of welcome is extended to Advocate Mantula from Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs, University of South Africa. We deeply appreciate his presence here today. We know that he is an extremely busy scholar whose services I know are in great demand nationally and even internationally. Therefore, we do not take his presence here today for granted. We all look forward to listening to his keynote address. Furthermore, a special welcome is reserved for Ms. Mahlangu, the moderator in today's dialogue. As a broadcaster whose station focuses a trust on African issues, her expertise in this area will become highly useful today. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in challenging and interesting times, as our program director had already alluded to. Africa finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place today. Some of the challenges afflicting Africa, among others, as Ntate Muroera had already indicated, are poverty, unemployment, inequality, inadequate healthcare infrastructure, civil wars, climate change, vulnerability to global market forces. As Ntate Muroera said, what is happening so far away ends up impacting negatively on our activities in Africa. And also our vulnerability to global market forces. What happens in Tokyo, in New York, in London, also impact how our rand, our currency, performs. So these are challenges indeed which we, as the African continent, cannot run away from. However, despite these challenges, Africa shows huge potential culturally. For example, the music industry. I'm going to use South Africa here as our example. We have isiKhathamiya. I think all of us know about Black Mambazo, the music that they render. It's appreciated in the whole globe. And in many instances, you find them visiting foreign countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, singing there, and people appreciating their music. These days, we also have Kwaito for the young ones. And when I came here, I was listening to beautiful amapiano music, which is doing very well. I also go to YouTube and listen to music. I know this song titled, no, let me not mention it. Lest some of the artists are going to complain that I did not quote them. Are going to complain that I did not quote them. Yeah. But in general, amapiano music for me is so impressive. I stream it every day. I download it. And that can become a source of income for the artists. We also have rumba music. In my language, we call it chingondo. Played mainly in Zimbabwe, Zambia, the DRC. We also have beautiful Nigerian music, especially gospel music from Nigeria. Is very popular. So I'm highlighting this type of activities to indicate that it's not only doom and gloom as far as Africa is concerned. You might take a look at our attire our traditional clothing. And I've seen ladies here looking elegant, looking amazing in their attire. And I trust our cameraman will zoom in on them so that those who are in New York today can see how beautiful our women are. And this is very good for our economy. If you were to go to Toyando, one of the towns in the northern part of this region, there are ladies there who run shops where they do make this type of clothing. And they are not cheap these days. So they end up making decent income to feed themselves and of course, their families. Our cuisine, food, in my culture, we have mutuku, sour porridge. In northern Sotho, you call it what, tini? Yes, that is part of our cuisine. You can end up opening a restaurant specializing in African cuisine, and you are going to become very successful. Museums, and it's sad a bit that we don't have so many museums in South Africa. But if you were to go to other countries, especially overseas, like in London, like in Amsterdam, museums there are very, very busy, income generating. You'll find a throng of crowds paying visit to such museums, and they make a lot of money. So this is something that we as a country can also emulate. I'm just quoting a few instances here, and I know I'm not the guest speaker, and I don't know what the guest speaker is going to speak about. I apologize in advance if I had quoted something that he had already prepared for, but it doesn't matter. We are celebrating Africa, and all of us here are Africans. Remember, Africa is regarded as the Eden of humanity. Whoever says Africans are of a lower status is due to ignorance, because originally the human species comes from Africa. So basically we are all Africans. With these few words, Ntate Morerwa, I once again extend a warm welcome to everyone, and I trust we will have a fruitful and engaging dialogue from our guest speaker and even from the panel. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Madaje, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, for teaching and learning. There's also, Prof, I'm also highly impressed that you listen to latest trends, especially Amapiano. I thought you would narrate the Stimela by Yuma Sekila. But I see you're moving with times. And there's another genre that they know also emerging, Bargele Kompo. Hey, Yabarobale Watrakale Kompo. When I asked why they love it so much, Barbari later, Kaore, it talks about where we come from and some of the dire situations that we are experiencing. And despite these challenges that we are talking about, Prof. Madaje, that Africa is losing so much of its cheese, and we keep asking who moves its cheese, but we actually know who moved the cheese. And I hear some scholars are decolonizing because they know who moved the cheese. They are trying to take it back. But of utmost importance for me, Prof, is that these solutions that we are looking for are very, very, very difficult. And the reason is that we are not accelerating some of these programs that have been put into place, like your intra-African trade. Even when we talk about, you mentioned issues of our cultural economy, and we are one of the greatest economies when we talk about the textile industry, which talks about the beautiful garments that we see. But how to accelerate and trade with one another remains a huge challenge. But even in that state, we still have people like Ndate Victor Khomeswana, who believes that Africa is open for business, and that dialogues such as this can open up such opportunities. I thought he would have given up that Africa is open for business. Then he came back and said, I went back to check the state of Africa, and Africa bounces back. So he's a firm believer of the potential of Africa. When the theme, I guess when we even go into the actual discussion, they will elaborate more and support him that what actually do we need to do in order to bounce back as Africa, which means if we need to bounce back in that Khomeswan, we've lost somewhere. And I don't know which will be the springboard as we bounce, so that we bounce in leaps. Thank you very much, Prof, for welcoming us, and you did complete my acknowledgement list. So you did very well, so which means now the protocol is fully observed. Thank you very much for that. And let's move along to the prologue by the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Management and Law, Professor Umpimetsi Sibanda. Let's appreciate him.
Good morning. I hope you'll hear me, because I'm battling with some flu, but it's not contagious. You know, from the sun-kissed sands of the Sahara to the lush canopy of the Congo, from the Atlantic shores of Senegal, of the mountains heights of Ethiopia, and down to the misty hills of Mahobaskloof in Limpopo, and the vibrant heart of Gauteng, Johannesburg, we are many, yet we are one. Ladies and gentlemen, before voices rise in address, and in frank address, as Professor Mukwena said, before arguments take shape in dialogue, we pause briefly, deliberately, to situate ourselves with a longer arc of history, an arc that predates us, all of us here, yet calls upon us. In terms of my time, it is not 12 yet, and I will say, Manganani, good morning, bonjour, Jumelang, Ndimasholoni, Abusheni, habari za asubuhi, Chobela, Inakwana, Hwaimore, Molweni, Al-Saham alaikum. These greetings are not merely linguistics or linguistic expressions. They are affirmations of presence, markers of a continent whose diversity does not fragment it, but defines its richness. We convene this morning simply, not only to mark a month on the calendar, but to engage with a living historical continuum, one forged through struggle, sustained by intellectual vision, and animated by an enduring quest for dignity, unity, and self-determination across Africa. Africa Month, observed each May, is therefore not ceremonial. It is a moment of reflection, a moment of interrogation. It asks us to consider the historical, cultural, socio-economic, and political forces that continue to shape the African condition within nations and beyond them. At this particular historical juncture, that interrogation acquires and also requires renewed agency. We meet in what scholars increasingly described as age of polycrisis, where economic instability, climate change, geopolitical tensions, and social inequalities do not occur in isolation, but they intersect, they compound, and they reinforce one another. It is within this context that today's dialogue is covered under the theme, irrespective of how you want to read this particular theme. If you allow me, I'll read the first one that was sent to me because then I found it much better. Pan-African cultural economic response in the age of polycrisis and global conflicts. This theme, it is not rhetorical, ladies and gentlemen. It is analytical. It calls us for a rethinking of Africa's position, not as a passive side of impact, but as an active agent of response. Its roots dates back further than 1963. The tomorrow was said something about 1963, but it dates further than 1963. In 1958, in Accra, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah convened the first conference of independent African states. There, the African Liberation Day, then African Freedom Day, was born. A declaration not only of independence, but of intent. Nkrumah's conviction was clear that the freedom of one nation was incomplete without the liberation of all. His vision insisted on unity, economic reliance, and the assertion of Africa's voice in global affairs. And across the Atlantic, that same call, articulated in political thought, found resonance in cultural expression and musical memory. As Peter Tosh reflects in what I love most, Mama Africa. That is the track, by the way. I quote the lyrics. They took me away from you, Mama, long before I was born. They took me away from you, Mama, long before I came on in. Advocate Mandula, you'll agree with me that in these lines from Winston Herbert McIntosh, what people will call the only and the one and only Peter Tosh, the historical rupture of displacement is named, yet so too is the enduring act of return. Different in expression, of course, yet unified in purpose, which is the restoration of connection, of dignity, and of belonging. Over time, this observance evolved, across continents, across movements, taken up in particular by the Pan-African communists or communities in the diaspora, debated, reshaped, reaffirmed. You can use whatever term you want to use. Yet, it remained anchored in a singular purpose, that is the total liberation and unity of Africa. Then in 1963 in Addis Ababa, 32 independent states gathered to establish the OAU. It was more than an institution, ladies and gentlemen. It was a coordinated continental response to colonialism, to apartheid, and to fragmentation. In 2002, of course, this vision was renewed through the formation of the African Union, expanding its focus towards economic integration, governance, sustainable development, while retaining the 25th of May as a day of continental significance. For South Africa, this journey holds a particular and important meaning. It was really the reintegration of South Africa into continental structures in May 1994. That marked not just a political transition, but a return to a shared African destiny. Today, Africa Month calls us to engage with 3 pillars, in my view. Others can decide on the different pillars, but these are the pillars that I wanted us to look at. Pillars of unity, culture, and trade. Unity, not as an abstract ideal, but as a practical necessity in navigating global realities. Culture, as both heritage and resource, a repository of knowledge and systems, values, and creative economies capable of informing developmental pathways. And finally, the pillar of trade, as a driver of transformation, increasingly framed through continental instruments such as the African Continental Free Trade Area. At its core, that is the month, African Month, or even the day, lies Pan-Africanism, a philosophy that continues to guide the continent's aspiration, which finds its renewed expression in the Agenda 2063, a vision for integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens. It is precisely because of these intersections, ladies and gentlemen, that is between culture, leadership, and sustainability, that the dialogue seeks to explore. It provides what you can really like to call a platform of high-level intellectual engagement on Africa's response to global polycrisis. An opportunity to integrate how leadership can both be ethical and effective under conditions of complexity. A space to consider how sustainability can move beyond abstraction into lived developmental practice. A forum to foster interdisciplinarity in exchange among scholars, practitioners, policymakers, and students. Importantly, and I think I need to emphasize this dialogue also contributes towards a broader intellectual trajectory, building towards the Global Leadership and Sustainability Symposium in August 2026, to be held by the very same school, that is TGSL. So you can see that this is quite a very important event. And ladies and gentlemen, more than a century ago, as I move towards concluding, Prixley Ka Isaka Seme, speaking at Columbia University on the 5th of April, 1906, reflected on what he called the regeneration of Africa. And I know there is somebody who loves Prixley, that is our former president, Jacob Zuma. In his words, that is Prixley's words, the ancestral greatness, the unimpaired genius, the recuperative power of race, its irrepressibility, which ensures its permanence, constitute the Africa's greatest source of inspiration. Interestingly, If you want to read more, you can go and read that script by Prixley. I have it, Ntatemoroa, if you want it. But I also want to take something that's quite very important from now the actual script of Isaka Gasem. He said, I am an African. I set my pride in my race over against a hostile public opinion. Men have tried to compare races on the basis of some equality. I would like to ask you not to compare Africa to Europe or to any other continent. I make this request not from any fear that such comparison might bring humiliation upon Africa. The reason I have stated a common standard is impossible. Come with me to the ancient capital of Egypt, the Thebes, the city of 100 gates. The African already recognizes his analogous position and desires a change. The brighter day is rising upon Africa. The ancestral greatness, the unimpaired genius, the recuperative power of race, its irrepressibility, which asserts its permanence, constitutes the African greatest source of inspiration. I close from what I was quoting from Prixley, Isaka Gasem. Ladies and gentlemen, 63 years ago, it has been said, in Addis Ababa, a dream was born, woven into reality. Today we gather in that same spirit, not to dwell much more on the past, but to think with it and through it. In a moment and an age of polycrisis, the question is no longer whether Africa will respond, but how will Africa respond? And perhaps more importantly, on whose terms? More importantly, on whose terms? And now, we move from reflection to engagement, from prologue to perspective, from context to conviction. Zorora Zwakanaka.
Thank you, Prof. How do we respond to Zorora Zwakanaka? I want to respond, but I'm linguistically limited. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for the prologue, Prof. I picked up three very important things. You know, when someone speaks, when they change the tone, they emphasize, you know, this is close to their heart, and it is at the center of their talk. And you emphasize the issue of unity, the issue of culture, and the issue of trade. And when we look at the polycrisis, we look at the intersection of these three that you are mentioning. One realizes that as a continent that is blessed with extraordinary wealth, that's the cheese in the instance of the story I told. The minerals that are beneath our soil, the cultural identities that we have that actually can be commercialized, the youth population that should be driving this progress forward that you're talking about. Now you are making me wonder is it really that the cheese is missing from the maize, or as a continent we have struggled to master the maize. We don't know how to negotiate our way to our minerals, our way to commercializing our culture, our way to trading with one another. Because if you talk about the unity that we need, And resources without unity will obviously produce competition instead of the continental advancement that we are looking for. So it's very much important that I think even when they come to debate as a prologue, they will consider answering these questions of how united or how more united should we be. Maybe one can even ask, why was it so easy for Africa to be colonized? Because that shows that maybe we were not united, because if borders divided us, then the issue of unity comes into play. I hope when they come and discuss these issues, they also tap into these 3 dimensions or pillars that you mentioned, which will lead to our transformation. Let's appreciate him again for the prologue. And to celebrate Africa Month and having an event in that theme would be unjust not to have some of the aspects of our creativity, that storytelling. Remember, Africans in the main use art to tell the story of Africa. Even the music you talked about, Prof. Madaje, they would tell the story. Some of those were actually liberals using music because they were band together and do all of those things. And art was at the center of that. You know, I learned at some point, especially the University of Limpopo, when we talk about the liberation route, that people like Wale Sorote read their first poems on our campus in Turfloop. When all that was banned, the political gatherings and speeches, they will write poetry that with what we call poetic license. It would be very difficult to say, no, you mean this, because one can come and say, no, but this is what I said. It's not what you are saying it means. So for that, we also are going to have poetry. I'm inviting Muchizi Chifura to come and render poetry for us. Let's appreciate our poet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Program Director. My name is Muchizi Chifura, as you have said. I don't know if the program coordinators and facilitators had done this on purpose, where they chose this day, which is the 7th of May, wherein 30 years ago, we had, 30 years ago, a day after today, on the 8th of May, we had President Thabo Mbeki render a beautiful rhetoric, where in that rhetoric, they were adopting the Constitution, and his bold assertion was that I am an African. In that spirit of Africanicity, allow me to tell you more than just my name. Allow me to give you my identity and who I am as an African person. Ndine Muchizi wa Chifura mudau wa chibula cha machokotika cha gumba lobhelo ofera ngambeyu. Ene Chifura mutowole mukona ngakunde Chifura sali kuindwani. Alibo Chifura ndoni uita kole kole Chifura ndoni mfumo shaba nalo. Ndikombe mfawa to chirinda. I say this as an introduction of who I am, wanting to reiterate what President Thabo Mbeki was saying when he said I am an African. I am an African. I am a product of atrocities that were committed upon my being. My flesh remembers the severed hands in the rubber-blade forests of the Congo. My bones hold the dust of the Herero and the Nama driven into the scorched sands of Namibia. My spirit carries a desolate silence of the Khoi and the San, erased from the greater expanse of the Cape. I have been shaped in the crucible of a merciless history, stitched together by the deep scars of survival and the heavy inheritance of genocide. Yet, as I stand, anchored to the soul right now, bearing the weight of these centuries, I ask for no charity of heart. I hope that none dare pity me when I say I am an African. For I am a direct descendant of the architect of the great kingdoms of Mapungubwe, those who forged gold and gathered the wealth of the interior. My lineage is etched into the enduring mortarless stone walls of the kingdoms of Zimbabwe. My intellectual inheritance flows from the ancient universities of Timbuktu and the vast golden trade routes of the empires of Mali and Ghana. I am the child of kings and queens who bore all the races of the earth, the cradle from which humanity took its very first breath and stepped into the dawn of time. I carry the blueprints of civilization, governance, and the monumental creation within my marrows. Therefore, none must mistake. My memory of my genes stretches across the oceans, painting a picture of a brutal colonial past that was endured by African people across the diaspora. Scattered across all corners of the world, we were severed from our names and our lands, sanctioned to be foreigners and second-class citizens on the very same earth on which God created us all equal. We were made exiles in our own skin, forced to fertilize foreign souls with the sorrow of our tears, and forced to build nations that sought to diminish our humanity. Yet standing in this persistent shadow of this history, I do not feel shame in asserting this reality. This is because at the end of the day, none of us here lost the essence of that which makes up our humanity, Ubuntu. I am an African, not because I was born in the land of Africa, but because the land of Africa has been born in me. Allow me now to speak for the African youth when I say I feel a quiet anger, not hate, but a deep burning truth. The unhealed wounds of my past still bleed, and until justice is restored, we will walk with an ache in our hearts. Yes, we endure, resilient, unbowed, yet very conscious, knowing that to forgive is not to forget. Forgiveness is a path we choose every day to walk in order to heal ourselves and our nation. Today, we stand here as the youth. We call for restoration and reconciliation, for the truth to be spoken, for wounds to be uncovered and acknowledged, for the wrongs of history to be faced with courage and honesty. Above all, we demand justice, not vengeance, but the restoration of our human dignity. I am African. As the people of South Africa, let us do better today, so that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. To forgive, like I said, is to choose hope, to believe that if we unite in truth and in deed, a better future is possible, that our land can be whole again, strong enough to bear the weight of our history told truthfully, and bold enough to sanction the hope of our own dreams. I am an African born of pain, resilience, and hope. I stand here before you, voice unshaken, declaring to you that if forgiveness and justice can walk hand in hand, the wound of yesterday will become the foundation of tomorrow. To the coming generation of Africa, this we have to say: Aluta cannot continue forever. Nda.
Yeah, no. Le gona ma Afrika. Ke a le kwa re le gona ma Afrika. Re a leboga ndao ndona. Ba ibolela bjalo. Ndao ya ndona. Ndao ya ndona. No, thank you so much Chifura for the beautiful poem. Of course, it reminds us of where we are, where we need to be. And Aluta will continue. Thank you so much. Let's appreciate him once again. All right, we are going into our keynote address, and we also have another aspect that showcases our culture so beautifully. And we will have, immediately after the introduction of the keynote speaker by Dr. Ramoba, senior lecturer here at TGSL, then we'll have the Chitsonga dancers. Immediately after the introduction of our keynote, then you usher our keynote speaker to the podium with what you do best. Ladies and gentlemen, let's appreciate the keynote speaker introduction.
Di Macheroni, Muribwanji, Zikomo kwambiri, kuzizira kwabasi. Absheni, Minjani, Epukeli. I'm standing on the protocols that were observed earlier. I'm here to introduce a multidimensional person who cannot be defined by a single role or a single trait or a single skill. I'm introducing a human rights lawyer, a researcher, a cultural activist, a commissioner, an academic, a media activist, a radio presenter, a reggae, can I say musician? Oh, he says no. Okay. No, that you can see that he's multidimensional. Yes. So let me quickly read the very short bio. In fact, ordinarily, mine would have filled 5 pages. But look at this great man. His bio is only half a page. All the stuff that I've been saying are not in the bio. Showing that, you know, those who are big will humble themselves. They're always humble. But the small ones try to be big. Okay, let me quickly read. Commissioner Advocate Ras Sipho Gideon Mantula is a researcher attached to the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs and focuses on elections, cultural diplomacy, strategic studies, and human rights law. He has published on elections, community participation, cultural diplomacy, and policing and security within the context of Agenda 2063. You know that Agenda 2063 is the framework, UN framework, strategic framework, or 50 years one. He is also an experienced election observer in countries such as the DRC, Kenya, South Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Madagascar. Advocate is a passionate and experienced expert in human rights and people's rights, including working with communities of practice or COPs on issues of human rights, conflict resolution, human security, elections, and indigenous leaders. He fearlessly speaks truth to power. Prof. Mkwena. He speaks truth to power on matters concerning African democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. He has been appointed as a part-time member of the CRL Commission, or Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Commission in South Africa, for the 2025 to 2029 term. And he serves as a member of the SADC National Committee within DECO. Advocate is engaged on media platforms on pertinent issues faced by Africans in general. He has been a media activist and commentator on African current affairs for more than 20 years, such as SAFM Radio, Radio 2000, Newsroom Africa, SABC and ENCA, and international media Sputnik Africa. Having learned his wealth of knowledge and passion for African music, arts, and culture for many years as a host of shows on Soweto TV and Radio Punish, he has made a positive impact on local communities. He is a true son of the soil, having dedicated his life to the rise of Africa and her people. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time. Help me to welcome our keynote speaker, Commissioner, Advocate, Ras Sipho Gideon Mantula. Mipululu! Karidove! Mipululu! Mipulukwane! Gebani bagai!
Madume, Dumelang, si Ijambo Africa, Molweni, Dumelang, Absheni, to the leadership of the University of Limpopo, Dr. Jeffrey, Bele, Professor Mukwena, as well as Professor Madache, which we have already done what I say, sharing of notes and tones of my testament or my telegram. I think what is important on this presentation, I didn't want to read it, it is a very long one, but a theme, just to cover what was said earlier. We are observing Africa Liberation Month. Prof. Sibanda was correct to say the genesis of this Africa Liberation Day, it stems from 1958 to 1963 to eThekwini moment, 2002, when we changed OAU to AU. But my theme is also a very uncomfortable theme, because the crisis that we see globally, it is also local. The crisis that we see also national is also provincial. The crisis that we see in our institution, it is also in our own communities. So we are not separate or immune from the current crisis. The response and the reaction and the interventions is what we are seeking this afternoon and beyond. This Pan-African cultural economic response, it is an attempt also to say, as Africans, Professor Falola for the past 2 days has been indoctrinating us about importance of the African proverbs. When the music changes, so the dance changes. When the shepherd comes home in peace, the milk is sweet. A flea can trouble a lion more than a lion can trouble a flea. Those are most important African proverbs that as scholars, as thinkers, as policymakers, as business people, we must always think about our African knowledge as the basic, not as an added text, but as a core text. Secondly, when we are looking at the challenges of this polycrisis, that concept, Professor Sibanda, when we had the Africa Peace and Security Dialogue last year, then that concept started to gain traction in the peace and security dialogue. What is this polycrisis? Other they say polycrisis. The issues of continental wars and global wars, the epidemics and even pandemics, the equal relations, how human beings relate continentally and globally, and the geopolitical competition of the natural resources. Europe calls them critical minerals. We call them natural resources. Social inequality, disparity, it is going high on a daily basis. The global economy is not only shifting, but it is shaking. With ballooning public debt. Young people knows, if you remember the song Prof. Madiche, when they talk of Kwaito, Tebe said, Sekoloto. Rephela ka sekoloto. We live in debt. We are in debt as the continent and as a country. But there is a say of reparations also. Where do we balance the issue of debt? At the same time, there's no reparation. We have overhyped equity markets. We have high fuel and food prices. We have unsettled trade relations. There are unsettled trade relations that we see. Even on cultural goods, we have those challenges. There's climate change. This province, you don't need to know the word climate change. You know floods already. Mirwalela, you know it already. How do we respond to it? In a cultural context. Disaster management operations are on high alert, even as we are speaking today, in Cape Town, in Joburg, every corner. But let me remind you, as the student and as the sons and daughters of the soil and as the sons and daughters of the blood, Africans are Africans by blood and they're Africans by soil. Unkgopotse reminded us that as black graduates, by virtue of our age and our academic standing, we have been called upon to bear a great responsibility in the liberation of our people. Our so-called leaders have become the balls of the same machine which is crushing us as a nation. We have to go back to them and educate them. Times are changing, and we should change with them. The magic story of human achievement gives irrefutable proof that as soon as nationalism, Pan-Africanism, as I add, is awakened among the intelligentsia, it becomes the vanguard in the struggle against the alien rule. I don't conclude here, but Onkgopotse said, in conclusion, Mr. Chancellor, I say, let the Lord be praised. For the day shall come when all shall be free to breathe the air of freedom, which is theirs to breathe, and when the day shall have come, no man, no matter how many tanks he has, will reverse the course of events, close quote. As Thabo Mbeki said 30 years ago, I'm an African. I'm born of the peoples of the continent of Africa. The pain of the violent conflict that the people of Liberia and Somalia, of the Sudan, of Burundi, of the Congo, of Algeria, is a pain I also bear. The dismal shame of poverty, suffering, and human degradation of my continent is a disease that we share. The stain on our happiness that derives from this and from our drift to the periphery of the ordering of human affairs leave us in a persistent shadow of despair. This is a savage road to which nobody should be condemned. The evolution of humanity says Africa reaffirms that she is continuing her rise from the ashes. Whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. Getting into the context and into the content, the policy framework. We can't talk about NEPAD and AU and Agenda 2063 without Bravicta Abuja 1991 treaty. Even if Abuja comes from as early as the 70s, the issue of economic reform and economic stability of Africa post-independence of 1960. I am of the view that the economy of Africa never existed after 1960. We actually, as Fanon will have said, the pitfalls of national consciousness went even into the economy. We took where the colonizer left and we didn't change nothing. So our economy never changed from 1960. We took what the colonizer left and we continue. And what we did, we built the bourgeoisie, petty bourgeoisie, and the comprado elites. They left the masses and the farmers and the thinkers and the growers behind. Not beside, behind. They left them, they became a screen on them. That's what Fanon say. The leaders became the screen to the masses. The foreign direct investment on cultural issues is the promoter, is the big artist from Europe, but it's not our local artist, a direct investor. A farmer in our community is not a direct investor. A crafter in our community is not a direct investor. He might be an indirect investor in the future, probably. This plan of action
of Abuja Treaty of 1991 and Agenda 2063, it says cultural identity is key. Cultural heritage and regional collaboration. As you said, unity, culture, and trade. Very important pillars. Cultural protection. We have legal minds here. I always call them intellectual property rights. But I'll always joke, I say, where there's a copyright, there's a copy left and there's a copy center. There's no copyright only, but there's a copy left and there's a copy center. Sustainable use of human beings that are here. We are all here as assets. We are not liabilities here. We are assets. We are not objects here. We are servants. How do we redefine what Toni Morrison say? Definition belongs to the definers, not to the defined. Prof, how do we redefine Pan-African creative economy if we leave our Asian traditional ways of our literature, our music, our performing arts that we have just seen here? The commercial sector, the aspect of fashion, design, that was the UN framework. We have to go beyond the UNESCO framework. We have to redefine Africa's Pan-African cultural economic resources. How do we respond when you have industrial and innovative young people in this room? They have to adapt and adopt the new ways of rethinking. As Prof. Falula said, you can think of AI, but also think of AI of ancestral intelligence. Not only artificial intelligence, ancestral intelligence. The socio-economic political issues. What impedes our recovery? What impedes our response? What is then the role of a social, what is the social role of an artist and even creatives and an intellectual then? Is to contribute to his community, is to go back to his community and educate, is to create employment also as an intellectual. What then is the relation of an activist and an artist and an intellectual if he doesn't understand political activism, democracy? Professor Ramuse will say Ubuntu-cracy. He will have said, not democracy, he will say Ubuntu-cracy. He will say Bantu-cracy, not democracy. Fela Kuti said democracy is the level of craziness which has been demonstrated. Democracy, crazy demo, demonstration of craziness. So, Ramuse says Ubuntu-cracy, Bantu-cracy. I'm not inventing, I'm doing like Falola said, have a complexity of imagination. Just dream sometimes, but don't be in a nightmare. Huh? Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, but sometimes a dream becomes a nightmare, nachmir. Creative practice must also be linked to local, regional, continental, and international standards. We cannot be activists and intellectuals and artists without connecting. I see in the midst here, we have another artist who is inspired by Miriam Makeba here. Miriam Makeba, 1963, was in the OAU meeting. You must know that. Miriam Makeba was there. 2008 in Durban, Miriam Makeba was there. So never undermine the role of our own who were part of the liberation struggle. Inequality on cultural consumption. Are we cultural producers or we just consume cultural products? We see in Brazil and South Africa that there's a challenge in terms of this cultural consumerism. We just consume culture. We don't want to produce it. Somebody want to talk about the BRICS countries, I know later, the global south. That's where it is very important. Why India, Russia, China, they are not ashamed of their cultural norms and values. They are like their language. They are not ashamed of their languages, their cultures, their food. Another issue, digital infrastructure. the local artists, the continental artists, the markets, they need to understand there's a digital colonization. There's digital infrastructure inequality. We might want to talk about digitization, but always let's think of orality. Let's also think of physical and material and spiritual aspects. What are the obstacles now? And what are the opportunities? Let's not always go into the obstacles and challenges. Let's bring solutions and opportunities. Yes, we can talk about opportunities in the digital space of AI, artificial intelligence, which is not my vocab. There's a risk of content piracy. There's a risk also of lack of IP laws, intellectual property laws that they don't protect. There's also the challenge of enforcement. How do you track and trace piracy and plagiarism of the work of our elders? One of the key writers, Memirem Tlali, who wrote many books, they were plagiarized by international young people and students in their masters and PhDs. If you think of Memirem Tlali, the first black novelist. Digital transformation. Yes, we are reaching global audience, it's fine. But do we have infrastructure? Do we have the structure? That's a challenge. We have regulatory gaps. The rise of transnational digital platforms, it raises power dynamics. It asks for fair revenue sharing for content creators. Solomon Linda Popi, now we talk of Mbube, the royalties were a challenge. The royalties of Miriam Makeba was a challenge. How do you look at those aspects? How do we recover if our great and our elders have suffered when we are talking about IP rights? The young artists in this province, we have seen the quarrel about the new artists in this province, that they will fight over those were my beats, those were my lyrics. But how do they collaborate and share knowledge? Rather than competing, but they complement one another. The informal sector and the network that I wanted to say, the IKS, Indigenous Knowledge System, that's an that is embedded to the creators, people who do beats, crafts, who do music. There's an IKS, there is an indigenous and endogenous knowledge there. We should embrace it. Whether we are in any space. I will be very quick on this aspect now, because history, as John Henry Clark said, is a compass that tells you where you are, where you have been, and then where you are and where you are going. The issue of regional integration. We can't talk about creative economy respiration. We can't talk about creative economy response on the geopolitics of wars now without integration. Lest we have disintegration. You talk of unity, Professor Sibanda, there is a disunity that we are seeing. When you look at the early 1960s founding fathers and mothers, they spoke about this issue of integration. There was a Monrovia in the Casablanca block. Your Nkrumah and Nyereres and Silases, they were a bit struggling about how are we going to have this unity concept and integration, this one Africa, borderless Africa. There was a real struggle around that. But Nkrumah spoke about us being at the center of global economy. And that's where I wanted to push culture and creative economy at the center of global economy of this African continent. Integration also, we need to understand, it has to address the neo-colonial relation of the colonizer and the colonized, the oppressor and the oppressed. When you look at the question of integration, the Abuja Treaty of 1991, Bra Victor, it has achieved, it had 6 stages. If I go to the last stage, they are still struggling to create an African central bank, which has to include the cultural bank and the seed bank. Because agriculture and culture, they go together. The people who plant in the fields, There's a song when they plant. People, when they go exile, there was a song. So there's always a link. They have created the Pan-African Parliament in 2004. They wanted to create it by 2028, so they've moved. There's no continental monetary union so far. The African common market still limping and struggling. They are still trying to coordinate the non-tariffs and tariffs. I call them the global traffic of tariffs of Trump. It's a traffic of tariffs. Like last year, we saw more than 20 African countries on tariffs. That's a traffic, Parakan, sepete, evaluation of how we were, like a country like Lesotho was hit with 50% almost of the tariffs. In Africa, they say by 2019, I wonder how far. They've established the Africa Continental Free Trade at least 3 years before. They said 2017, it was established in 2020, but COVID disturbed Africa Continental Free Trade. And we have our own there, Wamkele Mene. He's the Secretary General of the Continental Free Trade. Let us be aware of that. The second aspect, they say we have to establish barriers to regional trade, Prof. Sibanda, as we talk of trade. They say by 2007, but we still have barriers in the trade. The last one has been the first. They wanted to establish and create the RECs. What are the RECs? Regional economic bodies. I wonder in this hall, our student and our intellectual, do we know all the RECs? Because I think you know only SADC, you know ECOWAS, you don't know Maghreb Union, you don't know COMESA, Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. You know ECAS, the Economic Community of Central African States. IGAD, you know, Ambassador William Tlapo used to joke, say, but IGAD was supposed to deal with climate change, but now IGAD is dealing with peace and security. But you don't have, in all these RECs, a cultural project, cultural diplomacy project. It is not there. So how can we push cultural creative economy when all these RECs, they don't have a cultural program? Yes, you can have cultural policies. You can have African Renaissance Chart of the AU, which is turning almost 20 years now. South Africa is a signatory to the Cultural Renaissance Charter. But provinces like Limpopo, have they adopted that African Cultural Renaissance Charter into their cultural policies? That's a serious challenge. Now, I'm coming to an important aspect. I've raised all these RECs. What is the link? How do we locate and trace cultural economic areas of cooperation in the RECs coming from South Africa? If you have 8 RECs, where do we bring culture in those 8 RECs? It's nowhere. Now, the elephant in the room. We can talk about politics, economy, and culture, but conflict and political instability, it is a serious challenge. But what then is the role of culture and diplomacy? 2019, 2022, there was a biennale in Angola, which I've attended in Luanda. Biennale is every after 2 years. So they were using the power of arts and culture in conflict resolution. Our country will not send even a minister, and I will meet different presidents from DRC, the president of Portugal will come, president of Mozambique. South Africa, we don't even send a minister, a president doesn't go. I will meet Tshisekedi there, I will meet Ngwesu, Denis Ngwesu there, Nyusi when you are still the president there, engaging with the youth on what is the role of arts and culture on peace and security. 2019, 2022, with arts and culture in Dirko. We took the late Mayor Sbongile Khumalo in 2019. There was the issues of xenophobia and Afrophobia. I can tell you in that session we were challenged as South Africa that we are xenophobic, we are bad people, in a serious plenary. But what did we do? A soft power landing. In the evening, when they are drinking, their wines and everything, we hit them with music. We sanitize them with our cultural music. Not only Mayor Sbongile Khumalo, the theater also. We brought the actors from State Theatre. We narrate our story now. That was 2019 and 2022. So I am trying to say, even if we have conflict in Africa, we have to use the power of culture. The mediation efforts that we see in Africa, we cannot have only former president mediating. What then is the role of women and the role of youth and the role of arts and culture? If you look at the question of European Union, others they say European Union integrated when Africa's independence was still coming up. And for us, if we want to talk about integration, economic growth, but you have conflicts, you have wars in the neighboring countries, within countries like Sudan, you have two Sudans, you have North Sudan and South Sudan, and there is still conflict simmering there. Let me move to an aspect which is also key. The same regional economic bodies, they will never have peace, so long as you still have power mongering. We have military revolutions and military coups coming in the region. Madagascar is a case in point. There was a military coup or a military revolution, as in the Sahel, they are saying it's not military coups, it's military revolutions. The other aspect is the conflict spilling over to neighboring countries, and we don't address them as a collective. What then is the role of our kings and queens, our traditional leaders, where we go back to the traditional laws of mediation? What then is the role of Amakhosi, Bakoro? We are still struggling with the traditional courts bill, by the way. There's a Traditional Courts Act, there's a Traditional Courts Bill regulations. How are we going to deal with it? Let me jump now, come directly to the province now, and the Office of the Premier, as you are listening, you will understand, I've said this before, but I'm not repetitive. You talk about sunrise industries. Today, I conceptualize the word sunset industries probably now. You talk about sunrise, and I put number one as creative and cultural industries. It must be number one in the province. Your provincial development plan on sunrise industries must also include the sunset. I put cultural and creative as number one. I put renewable energy, solar and hydrogen economy number two. And I put digital number three. Because digital, for it to can succeed, there must be a cultural knowledge emerging, and there must be a hydro solar power. Not only ESCOM, but hydro solar power from water and from the sun. So the polycrisis that we are seeing in this continent, in this province, you are also having challenges of climate change. You also have challenges of economic instability, corruption creeping into the state, local government, provincial government, agencies of this. Like your LED, local economic development agency, it's fairly new, but it has to be challenged by the scholars in this room and the artists. How do you bring culture up? We have the issue of resilience, by the way, tool. What tool are we using in this province? You always talk about beneficiation in the mining sector. In the mining sector, there is culture and music. There's language in the mining sector. Sefanaka law that is in Marikana, it is a language of the miners. But in Limpopo, what is the language in the mining sector that we can embrace? Agriculture and agro-processing value chain. You talk about rural and heritage tourism. Mapungubwe, you have Kruger Park corridors that benefits Mpumalanga, Limpopo. Where do you put the creative sector there and cultural artists? As we speak now, I think we are very privileged in this hall. The ministers of SADC will be meeting in Kruger National Park on the 22nd of May, discussing the same question we are dealing with today. What is the impact of the geopolitics of the conflict that how will they affect the region? They might be a bit late, because SADC by nature is a bit late. It is overtaken by events. even if I am part of the SADC National Committee, which we have set up after 32 years, by the way, after 32 years. And we are still struggling, Bravicta, on that SADC National Committee. After 32 years, we have joined SADC in 1994, but we don't have the non-state actor platform, which artists, intellectuals must be part of. But it has not hit the ground. We are currently chairing SADC abruptly after Madagascar, and in August in Durban we'll be taking over as the SADC chair. Where is the SADC cultural diplomacy project? How are we going to link it? I think Limpopo province must also work alongside the Department of Arts and Culture on what they've introduced, the cultural creative industry clusters. There are 17 clusters there. My concern there was the issue of leadership. As the institute, as the Graduate School of Leadership, do find a way how you're going to assist these clusters of government on cultural and creative industry. The legal mind in this room, how are we going to assist in terms of the IP rights and the contracts of our artists when they have been dropped? The skill, what then is the role of African universities? Falola says there are universities in Africa, but you don't have an African university. So we need to develop the idea of African university. We have universities in Africa, but they have a Eurocentric mindset. We don't have an African university. The other aspect is 30 years also. Ngugi wa Ationgo, the ancestor, the sage of ages. The Pan-African cultural economy, for us to understand it, we have to understand these issues. The state and ideological apparatus that are at play. Ngugi talks about the struggle between the arts and the state as seen as performance. Performance how? An artist has a target and an audience to entertain. The state has a political power to dominate and control. So that's why there is always contestation. We call it the enactments of power, the politics of performance space. That was a seminal presentation by Ngugi in 1996 in May. So I think it is important for us, if we want to recover, respond, let us know we need to understand what power does the state hold, what cultural power does the creative economy and cultural practices hold. It's very key for us to know that. I don't want to go deeper into it, but when you have time, you read that part of Ngugi when he's raising about the issue that both the state and the artist may have different conceptions of time, place, content, and goals. Very important, the time and the place and the content and the context and the end goal. What are cultural economic opportunities now? I look at what Prof said earlier, the DVC, when he spoke about the spending music industry in the cultural economy. We spoke about the film. In this province, do we have even Muchachi's movie? If the Zulus can have Ishakalembe, do we have is there own narrative here in this current province that you can work when you think of film? Beyond Movango only. Beyond Movango, can we look beyond Movango and the old SABC apartheid movies that were always making us to be fools sometimes? If you look at all the stories, Nkosheng, all those stories, they were not depicting us. And when you look at towards the end of that film, who's behind that? Who's the cameraman? Who's the boom? Who's the writer? It was not us. It was not us. The fashion, the crafts, the heritage tourism, I've touched on it, we can benefit. But let us always remember that the deep-rooted traditional knowledge is linked to the modern creative industry. Diversification. We cannot all be in art and want to do the same thing. We all want to become poets. We all want to become DJs. But there's no technician. There's no technical producer. There is no runner. It's like radio presenter who want to present without his own producer and without his listening club. Job creation as a cultural economic boost. How do you create jobs for young people and women, especially in an informal and gig economies? How? Community cohesion through shared cultural identity is very important. As I'm about to conclude now, I was impressed, people talking about reggae and artists, Peter Tosh, Bob Marley. I cannot rehash them. I will only go to Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey gives us a clear understanding of global conflicts and the polycrisis. His model was simple: self-reliance, economic independence. In Jamaica, they call it emancipendence, not independence, emancipendence. The unity of African diaspora, and Garvey also spoke about the Black Star Line. If you look at the flag of Ghana, there's a black star. It's based on Marcus Garvey's vision, a Jamaican national hero. And I am looking at Garvey and Limpopo. If you go to Venda, they say Venda, it is a little Jamaica. Garvey's blueprint is on economic transformation that can benefit Limpopo and Mpumalanga and Gauteng, because you are within that belt. Garvey emphasized the important aspect, education. That's why we are in an educational institution today. He says education is the cornerstone. He said if you have an educated and informed population, automatically you'll have economic progress. But if you don't have an educated nation, and you have a miseducated nation, then you will be stuck in poverty and hunger. Garvey goes further. Where education system often struggle with limited access, year in, year out, students don't have access to education, poor quality, the mismatched curriculum. You study this, but you'll apply for this job, but you are not groomed or mentored in that space. It's the same like people who do cultural or music or arts. They say, but where are you going to get work, Wanaki? How is that music? Which is not true. It's part of your creative calling and creative career. Even as a writer, as a poet, there is currency there. So Garvey emphasized that. As Marcus Garvey also emphasized the study of African history and culture, same like Falola. We can't talk about culture and creative economy without history and culture. It fosters the sense of pride in us and identity amongst our young generation and the present generation. This week I came across an article coming from Stellenbosch, but it was written by a black young person. Is South Africa facing a polycrisis in disguise? 3 Ds: digitization, decarbonization, diversification. And he says that what is the risk here, the polycrisis here, is that we find that the government talks about digitalization. Let's digitize everything. But we have lost most of our archives in the state. What are we really digitizing when we have lost a lot? Diversify, yes, we can. As South Africa, we are the best country in terms of diversification. I think Bravita can maybe testify to that. Other African countries, they have oil, they've got mining, it ends there. It's only now Botswana is engaging Rwanda now on diversification projects. Nigeria, they rely on the oil only. They only realize now, diversify. So the polycrisis, it means look at those areas. As I am concluding, I've got only 4 takeaways to say that the Abuja Treaty of 1991, the organs of the AU have to include creative cultural communities of practice and intellectuals. The organs of AU, such as the ECOSOC, the Pan-African Parliament that is in Gauteng province, must start to initiate creative and cultural programs. NEPAD, others they call it LEPAD or NEPAD, whether was it a LEPAD or a NEPAD, New African Economic Plan. Was it top-down or elite-driven? What is NEPAD? You know, was Mbeki, Abdullah Wade, Obasanjo. What is a new economic recovery plan for Africa if it doesn't have culture and history and identity? Agenda 2063, you cannot talk about it if it is in period of 10 years. How do we measure it with our 2030 National Development Plan? And why are we still stuck on 2030? Why don't we think of 2035, 2045? We are stuck on 2030 vision. Resource shortage and mobilization. In our midst here, we've got funders here, we've got bankers here, we've got policymakers. The issue of resource mobilization must benefit African communities. It is important that when we look at the financial burdens, the AU is not funding its own programs. The AU building in Addis Ababa was built by the Chinese, by the way. The AU headquarters in Addis Ababa was built by the Chinese. We didn't build it our own. The Pan-African Parliament was built by us in South Africa. But the issue of mobilization, it should also be on supporting the regional economic bodies and also supporting national and provincial governments and local government on the issue of creative and cultural spaces. There are legal breaches. If we don't look at Abuja Treaty, Agenda 2063, there's always that they are not binding. That's why member states, they don't care. You know, that we have a regional treaty, we have this, but they don't care. So there's a sense of legal breaches that one is seeing that if you think of AU, Abuja Treaty of 1991, Agenda 2063, the SADC 2050 vision, all these protocols, they don't say nothing because they don't relate with the ordinary people. Finally, we can't talk about integration transition when there's a moment of rhetoric to reality now. We have to move from rhetoric to reality. The issue of the continental free trade that was raised earlier. Are we talking goods and services only without cultural goods and knowledge? We can't talk of goods and services as like it's only money. You know, in government, they use the issue that there's goods and services, that's the budget we have. And I always ask, what is this budget of goods and services? You know, is it human capacity or human capital, or is it cultural goods? What is this goods? We need to look at the landscape of Africa. There's a free movement of people. You can't talk about free movement of goods without the people. Goods doesn't move alone, it moves with the people. There's a logic here. The 1.3 billion people in this country, they are fragmented. We have 50 markets, almost 50 markets that cannot compete because of the global economic issues. Europe did not integrate overnight. There was a political will, trust, and commitment. In Africa, we don't have trust and will. And finally, when I look at these areas, the visa wave, our artists, our artists cannot travel to other countries, so you need a visa waiver. The issue of travel, how do you easy travel? The issue of tariffs, how do you deal with it? South Africa, Lesotho, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Rwanda now, as I have alluded, there are many moves around that. That is part of changing that thinking. As I am closing, again, where I have started, Professor Falola, our international advisory board member of the TM school, when he says on culture and economy, reminds us that the power of African cultures is not only in its historical significance, but it is also in its ability to inspire and guide the development of the continent. African cultures have been evolving in response to change, and in other ways are solidly rooted in their shared past and present and future. And finally, the future of Africa is not just a wishful aspiration. It is a reality which has now begun now and will lead us to the future of our promise. On that note, I pause here and I want to thank you for giving me your ears. And I hope this debate will still continue in our minds, in our scholarly engagement, in our artistic performance, in our poetry, in our speeches, in our budgets, in our research agendas as the Premier's Office and other institutions. Our research agenda from sunrise to sunset. Let this province put cultural and creative industry at the top of restoring the cultural economy of this province. I might not have touched on the current conflicts, the Persian Gulf War of US-Israel-Iran. How do we respond? The conflict that is in Sudan, the conflict that is in the DRC, the conflict that is in the Sahel. Those are the conflicts. And finally, also, I might not have touched on the heritage sites and the cultural sites. Whenever there's a war, cultural sites are affected. The museums, the ravaging of the books, the museums, as you were saying, Prof. In Khartoum, there's no museum. They ravage them. In Iran, when they fought in the battle in February, they have ravaged most of the museums. So, as the war goes on, even culture, it is under attack. Ame akalo kire ke a leboga asante sana re no leboga ka manda Major Sota Beseka.
A resounding round of applause. Advocate Mantula, you know, there was once a student writing a research report where it says problem statement. Then he wrote, my supervisor. So you just problematized everything about polycrisis. Now we even realize that, hey, we are in trouble. It's not easy to synthesize the problems that we have as a continent. But you tried your level best, even in your summary. You tried to indicate that there's still issues of conflicts and war that you could touch that would still affect this. But a take home that I think the audience should remember, it's your emphasis on cultural and creative industry. That if we were to look at advancement of our continent, that must be at the center of our agenda. Especially that, but I see there's movement. We are moving from STEM to STEAM. They added A in STEM that to consider issues of artistic creativity. Because I think maybe they realize that even the issue of climate change we talk about, it borders around issues of the deficit of ethics, because ethics is humanity. If you focus on STEM and you leave out the people who will train, the engineers, will just ban fossil fuel like nobody's business, and accountability, where will it be? The sustainability that we're talking about, where will it be? So I think the inclusion of A in that STEM to have STEAM maybe is a nudge in the right direction, that the leadership will think of ethics, will think of humanity in their decision making in the industries. They will think of humanity, that human is important. And I think Africa and her children will rise, as you said it, that we are destined to rise. We just need to look at issues that set us back. Thank you very much for your very comprehensive talk. It touched a lot of things. Let us appreciate him once more. And in the interest of time, I'm moving straight to hand the baton to the moderator who's going to moderate our panel discussion on the very same theme of this dialogue. Our moderator has over 20 years of experience as a radio broadcaster. So, started her career as a journalism intern at Gauteng-based station Kaya FM after completing her studies at Boston Media House, where she majored in radio broadcasting. She worked her way up in the newsroom as an intern to reporter and news presenter. After 6 years at Kaya FM, she got a job at South Africa's external radio station, Channel Africa, where she currently works as senior reporter. She has Media Studies Diploma from Boston's Media House, Bachelor of Arts in Exchange Program from February to March 2006. And she has been with Channel Africa since 2007 and traveled to numerous African countries covering big stories such as the African Union Heads of State Summit in Ethiopia. She also covered a lot of stories around the topic or the theme that we are going to discuss today. That is why she's so fitting to come and moderate this channel. Ladies and gentlemen, let us appreciate Ms. Nhlanhla Mahlangu to come and take over the panel discussion.
Thank you so much and good afternoon. Like the program director has already introduced me, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu. I've been a journalist for over 20 years, traveled the continent, mainly the continent, and I'm very much passionate about the continent because I just feel that we are better placed to tell our stories, the way they happen, as and when they happen, because there's so much reliance on Western media. And Western media portrays what they want you to know. They don't really delve much into the challenges that we have, the opportunities that exist. The opportunities, I'm happy that Advocate Mantula touched on a whole lot of issues, but one thing that really stands out for me is a cultural aspect. As you travel across the continent, you realize how powerful South Africa is. You are at a restaurant, you are eating, and there's a restaurant that plays music. And the music that is played is South African music. You know, you go to Zimbabwe, you go to Ethiopia, you think you'd hear music from those countries, but Amapiano is dominating the entire continent. You go to Kenya, they will ask you, why do you not bring your music to us? You know, not realizing that people are hungry for our music. People are hungry for what we have as a continent. So it makes me question as to why do we still have artists who struggle like this when they are loved like this across the continent? Why do we still have artists who die as paupers, who you always have to raise money for and contribute towards their standards of living, their well-being, when they are so powerful? I guess that's what the panel will delve into, and will dissect what Prof. Mantula touched on. With that, I'd like to introduce my panel members, firstly being Professor C.C. Nwake. Professor Nwake is a Turfloop Graduate School of Leadership, Faculty of Management and Law at the University of Limpopo. He holds a PhD in Accounting and Lectures, Accounting and Corporate Governance at the Graduate School of Leadership. Collins has supervised and graduated many doctorate and master candidates in accounting and business administration, respectively. His research focuses on the nexus between accounting and finance, business, sustainable economic development, including public financial accountability. He has widely published many articles in international journals. He's also published financing and accounting related book chapters and co-audited a sustainability accounting book called Diversity AI, Sustainability for Financial Business and Accounting. He has served in many DHET and ASAF academic and publication panels. Amongst others, CC Nwakwe served as a committee member as the Council of Higher Education, Evaluation and Standard Setting Committees for South African Business Schools MBA programs from 2013 to 2014. He's a fellow of the Teaching Advancement at University South Africa, and he's also an academic fellow of the Association of International Accountants, UK. Professor Nwakwe, you can take to the podium. Our next panelist is Dr. T.D. Mdluli. Dr. Mdluli is a senior NGAP lecturer in Indigenous Knowledge System, who's an multidisciplinary author with academic publications straddling the following areas: Indigenous knowledge systems, intellectual property, traditional leadership, African traditional health and beliefs, human rights, heritage studies. She also possesses excellent experience in customary legal issues, research, community engagement, and teaching. Dr. Mdluli, please. And lastly, we have Ms. Naledi Masango, who's earned her Master's in Arts and International Politics and currently in the process of registering for her PhD in the Department of Cultural and Political Studies at the University of Limpopo. Her doctoral research will be situated within the field of international politics, economy with a particular focus on the intersections of political and economics. She's a lecturer in the Department of Culture and Political Studies in the University of Limpopo, where she supervises honors students and research interests. Ms. Masango's broader research interests include global trade, global financial markets, international monetary and financial systems, and the impacts of globalization and shifting geopolitical configurations on policy and governance, and has presented her work at several national conferences. You're welcome to join the panel. Thank you so much. Maybe just to break the ice, I'll pose this question to the three of you. Maybe just your key takeaways from what Advocate Mamtula touched on. What is it that really stood out for you from his presentation? We can start with Professor Nwakwe.
Thank you so much, moderator and our audience. My key takeaway from Advocate's presentation is how we have lost our individualism, how we have lost humanism, and that humanism is the center point and the crux for development and for reigniting the culture and creativity. And that culture and creativity is fundamental for moving our development forward. And finally, my takeaway is that unity and peace is pivotal for achieving the development that we want.
And Dr. Mdluli?
I would like first to say in his speech, I heard him indicating quietly that the youth of 1976 did not submit their memorandum when they were killed. They were on their way to submit their memorandum, of which now they are about to turn 50 years. So my take is that we have to stop dancing old tunes. We have to stop talking about our minerals that were being taken while we can produce our own using our cultural or indigenous knowledge systems.
Ms. Masango?
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me rise on the already established protocol. And I think my take from Advocate's presentation in this case is that there is a lot of power within identity, right? And identity is also not only a political phenomenon, but it is also has economic implications, right? So identity, from what I heard, what he said, identity is shaped by narrative. Narrative is shaped by consumption, and consumption is curated and built by creatives. So by going back to the knowledge systems that are within or are embedded within our own heritage, then we will be able to build a proper identity that will be able to define us within the international system.
Yeah, looking at the theme for this dialogue, African cultural economy and business opportunities in the context of current global conflicts. Prof, maybe let me start with you again. What power then does the cultural economy have?
The cultural economy in Africa possesses grand power in moving our economy and in creating employment. Currently, our audience, it may please you to know that South Africa alone, our culture and creativity contributes 4% to South Africa's GDP. If you go to East Africa, Kenya, culture and creativity contributes 5% to their GDP. You go to West Africa, Nigeria, culture and creativity contributes 3% to their GDP. Then you come down to, does this culture and creativity contribute to employment, poverty reduction? The answer is yes. Culture and creativity in South Africa alone contributes up to over 1 million jobs as of 2023. And the figure has risen by now. In terms of poverty alleviation, culture and creativity contributes over 400 million South African rand, and cutting across middle income, low income, and higher income. The figure continues, and that was as of 2023. Let me pause.
And just looking at the role that leaders then should play in elevating culture within African economies. Maybe Ms. Masango, you can take that question. What does sustainable leadership look like in today's world?
So if we look at sustainable development in this case, right, and I'll relate this to something that is currently taking place in the international system, right? BRICS took a very intentional stance when they felt that they no longer belong in the current international financial system, right? And through a particular identity, right, an identity that is centered around building economic resilience, achieving political autonomy and political sovereignty, right, they managed to try and intentionally move US reserves away from the US dollar, right, and into gold, right? So as they were intentionally moving away from the US dollar and investing into gold in this case, it has then led to gold reaching to new highs, right? And these new highs originate from that identity, right? And I'm trying to say that leadership has a crucial role in which it plays when it comes to particular frontiers of development, right? And I am also trying to reference the fact that when that intentional act of moving away from the US dollar took place and they invested into gold, which gold now has hit new record highs, companies, South African companies that actually produce gold have also benefited from that gold, the rise of gold in this case. So it means that if leaders actually take an intentional stance of trying to uplift their economic standing and uplift their political standing in the international system, it has potential ramifications to their existence in this case. So that is why it is very, very important that leaders, African leaders in this case, see the necessity of building a particular identity. If I were to ask you a question of what is Africa's identity in this current multipolar system, right? Because the unipolar moment has gone past, whereas the US was a superpower, global superpower. The global conflicts that are taking place in the international system are as a result of the unipolar moment, of a fragmentation of the unipolar moment, right? So what is Africa's identity right now in this multipolar, right, international system? So I think that is a definition in which African leaders should build, right? And through that definition, they can then be able to form a particular direction. That direction should also be guided, or they should use the future as a compass. They should be able to try and find a way, some form like a guidance. The identity would be a guidance on where Africa should actually be.
Yeah. Dr. Mdluli, I mean, I alluded to the fact that we still have artists who are successful in their own right, but they're also not successful because, you know, come retirement time, they're poor, they don't have houses, they die pauper, we have to contribute for them. How then do we incorporate education into a sector like that?
Let's start on the issue of intellectual property and promotion of indigenous knowledge system. Here in South Africa, for example, or Africa as a whole, we have many artists with different talents. But you find that along the way, like what advocate indicated, that their beats are stolen. And also the issue of technology nowadays that we are running in. We have a lot of digital content that are like focusing into music. You find that others, they have not put the patent, or maybe they put them into issue of intellectual property, so forth. And you find that the music is stolen, is no longer selling to the market. And another thing is the issue of corruption and nepotism in the system. Corruption is one of the tools that shoot the gift in artists. Department of Arts and Culture, for example, it gives funds to artists, but you find that those funds does not arrive on the hands of the holders. You find that maybe the tender is issued to different people, but because of nepotism and corruption, that funds will end up into cousins or brothers without promoting their music. Let's take a look in this kind of music, like they spoke of Amapiano or Likompo, or now for Xitsonga we have music, Shigaza Shama 2K. It's one of the music that youth is listening, one of the music whenever those who go to clubs or even to radios, they are playing. Also the Amapiano. In some, whenever you go in the morning taxis, buses, advertisements, they are using those kind of musics. And if you check some of the artists, in 1 year the artist is famous. In 2 years the artist is broke. 50 years later, the moment is out, the family does not want to hear anything from Department of Arts and Culture. So I believe that if we use our knowledge very well and we equip our people with the issue of intellectual property, that they own this music, and even when the funds are allocated to people, they land in the safe hands. I think our artists globally, even locally, or even in the continent, they will go far. Thank you.
Advocate Mantula, just to bring you in there, I mean, you spoke of opportunities that really exist for the sector. Is it then safe to say maybe it's important for us as a continent to then redefine what African culture is and the benefits that come with being in the sector?
Absolutely. We have to look at those opportunities in the sense of the Ministry of Arts and Cultures have to begin from provinces, but what about local municipalities? I bit struggle to find local economic development, not bringing cultural development in. Because you see, the month of May also is important. That 21st May is cultural development. It's the International Day for Cultural Development. But we miss these opportunities of looking at culture at the local municipality, at the district level. We want to be at the national level. So I look at those opportunities by also not only creating parks only. Because remember that local municipalities will create parks and then there will be community halls. But there are no centers of excellence that in the former homeland, Prof will remember, Prof Sibanda, you had Bo, Mabana Maba to Mabana Lifuruti. Those were cultural educational centers that were in the then Bantustan. I don't want to promote Bantustanization here, but I want to just say there was a good aspect of Mabana Cultural Center. And those centers were like all 17 areas of culture were represented. And those young people were not even paying a cent to access cultural knowledge. There was no payment. And I think that's where we are failing. Opportunities are on education, but we have to pay for education. Artists have to send their invoice to government for their performances. They will take the lowest one who will be invoicing the lowest one. They don't look at the talent and the messaging. So for me, that is a challenge. And sometimes people who are in arts and culture, they are not cultured, some of them. They are in arts and culture, but they are not cultured. You know, you find a person is in the Ministry of Arts and Culture, but he does not emulate those aspects. I used to say to Meleta Mbuli, I do sometimes think people who go to arts and culture, it's like they can go to the healer, man, they must be checked. Or are these people real to work for arts and culture? Are they for or real? Because when you are giving arts and culture as a heart and soul of any country, and I'll be raising this finally as I close. The late artist of Cape Verde, Cesara Ivora, Befi Diva, before she can transition, his country realized late that this was a great woman outside our country. But we never take care of her until she was in France. So I think our artists in provinces in the country, we must not allow them to end up becoming big outside this continent if we don't take care of them. Because we will lose that essence of the national pride.
Advocate, you also touched on barriers when it comes to trade amongst the continent. I mean, we have the AFCTA that was seen as the blueprint for the continent that was definitely going to ensure that there's easy movement of people, there's easy trade amongst the countries, but it's taking so long for it to be implemented, which also tends to create these bottlenecks. How then do we speed up that process and ensure that this agreement comes to fruition and it's implemented and it benefits the ordinary masses of the continent?
I'll say to you, there was one South African lady, Thando Songwevu, when COVID hits and Africa Continental Free Trade was struggling to find its space. We used to debate and say, but maybe Africa, when it integrates, it must integrate culturally also, through cultural goods. But the trade and the deficit and the barriers is made by member states themselves. If you think of Limpopo and Mozambique, the cultural artifacts that are so immense in both countries. But you find when we look at our currency, stronger than Mozambican currency, Metikash. But we don't take advantage of that. for me is that member states, they are sometimes having long sleepless dreams. They are dreaming and the dreams become nightmares. You know, they don't realize the agency and emergency of the young people and of the creative sector. When you look at wave, I mean the issue of visa waves, I mean waiving of visas, when I was saying earlier, for artist to artist exchange. Europeans have a summer camp for artist to artist for more than 3 months to maybe 4 months. In Germany, in Canada. But we don't find African artists exchanging programs and also benefiting because their member states are not. For me, is that culture has been seen as entertainment, but we don't see it as edutainment. I will feel that culture must be seen as edutainment rather than entertainment. It must not be seen as a budget deficit or we don't have budget, but let's put it as goods and services. You can't put cultural activities as goods and services. For me, those are the barriers. And so long as we still have leaders who want to emulate, one colleague said today we need to go back to European Renaissance. If Motsogo Peku was alive, he will not be happy because he said they try to confuse African Renaissance and European Renaissance when Pan-Africanism was the core of our regional integration. European Renaissance had its own flaws and its own gains. But have we allowed African Renaissance to live? We have not. So in short, I am saying member states are to blame. Citizens, we don't hold our governments accountable. That is one area that we are lacking. We do go to social media and post against government and against promoters and other artists. But social media posting doesn't assist. Engagement is very important and resolving those bottlenecks of regional integration.
Prof. Mwakwe, how can leaders foster a culture of sustainability within their countries?
Moderator, our leaders have a lot of role to play in fostering the culture of sustainability. And if we have to borrow from, I know advocate mentioned the differences between European cultural and creativity renaissance. But we have something to borrow from European and cultural creativity renaissance. Just quickly after the medieval time, between the 14th and 16th century, it started that those scholars then had to have a kind of a cultural rebirth. And that cultural rebirth was well supported by leaders. What did they do? They went back to the ancient of days, to the Greek philosopher times, tried to unravel science that helped them to, today we have the printing press, we have the medical students and the doctors are able to do anatomy. These developments were based on the unraveling of the ancient Greek philosophers. And what happened? The leaders of that time, and of course, remember, they started in the then Italy. So the leaders gave them the spur by creating an enabling environment, the infrastructure to do so. And you think about scholars like Da Vinci, Nicholas, Marco Polo, and they all benefited from government leadership policies that made the environment very conducive for them to develop the creativity and cultural innovation that led to the current scientific knowledge that exists and that we import from the developed countries. Here in Africa, we have a lot. We have a lot, and we have been mentioning them today. I mean, our colleagues that did dancing here today, think about the young man that did great poetic recitation today. We have the digital technology, but not everyone can afford the cost of digital technology, but the government can help. And that poet can integrate the very nice realms that he did today in digital technology, and that can be exported for great amount of money that can be that can form kind of foreign currency earnings for the country and for the individual artists. Even the dancers can integrate They are dancing into digital technology. Our DVC today made mention that he listened to Amapiano. And I can tell you, Amapiano is one of the greatest foreign exchange earners in terms of culture and creativity for South Africa. You go to West Africa, Afrobeats, the Nollywood, and what has happened is the government is able to support, leadership is able to support these. So for us here in South Africa, our leaders can support the young ones in terms of their creativity, the cultural talents that they have. When they do so, we will be able to ignite economic development and poverty reduction that can come from these talents that exist among the young ones.
Ms. Masango, with the challenges that have been alluded to and the opportunities that are there, but I'm dwelling mainly on the challenges, could it be that to some extent Africa is still colonized?
I think one constant that can be pointed to is that if we look at the structure of the international system, right, and we look at the type of, or the level of dependency of Africa on Western nations, then it does, in a sense, then it does point to the fact that Africa, there are still some remnants of colonialism that exist. Advocate mentioned that after Africa received independence, all the systems were still in place. The economic systems that were prevalent during the times of colonial times are still in place. So it means that those systems are carrying on, the systems of the oppressor are still carrying on, and hence many of the challenges that actually take place in the African continent, right? The oppressor is not here, but its systems is here, or their systems are here. So imagine if there is a continuation of those systems, but the continuation of that, so the systems are supposed to then solve some of the issues that we have. Are those systems not the same systems that brought issues in the first place? How is it that we are still continuing systems that brought much pain and degradation to the African continent? Right, so then it calls for some form of reconfiguration of these systems. A reconfiguration of these systems will then be able to speak to the people of the reality of the people will then be uplifted. Their standard of living will be uplifted, right? It is only through the reconfiguration of those systems, because living in a place where the systems are still in place, right, it still then causes the issues in which the oppressor intended to achieve in the first place.
Dr. Mdluli, before I open questions to the audience, then, what would you say are some of the challenges that needs urgent attention, and how should we go about addressing those challenges?
First of all, we have climate challenge that is happening right now. If we can check some few months back, Limpopo as a province, we had challenges of rains where a lot of people lost houses in Palabora, that side. In Mpumalanga as well, some roads were destroyed, some last week. And so these are some of the challenges that we have. Another one is falling into the economic crisis. In terms of economy, we have the milk that we're exporting, but then we don't own the cow. In reality, we need to own the cow, we need to own the milk, and also even that bottle that holds the milk. What I'm saying is that in terms of economy, our youth have to benefit. Everyone have to benefit. It's been long we've been crying about the minerals that have been exported to America, or maybe I can say to Europe. But why can't alone we take those minerals and we use them in our country? We have coffee that we say cocoa is being exported. Don't we have the knowledge of making our own coffee or our own chocolates? In terms of gold, I'm wearing jewelry here. Don't we have like even knowledge that can create earrings, that can create those bracelets or whatsoever I can mention. I think if we can tap more into economy, into climate changes, and even in the issue of land, that is our mother, we can go far. Let me take you a little bit on the issue of land. We are fortunate we have the traditional leadership. We have crisis with our government, with the lenses that they are using of colonialism. If you can check traditional leadership versus government, you can see that in these two, there's no agreement in some of the issues. In allocation of the land, or even the stands that belongs to people in the villages, they are not taken serious when it comes to even the banks when you want to buy a house, irregardless of how big my house is. Sometimes the government, they have a tendency of barricading the land and say, this is our land. And in reality, they say, misava yibelonga iyati house. But now the practice has changed. The municipality go and barricade. In Venda, that side in Toyando, some few weeks back, there are some houses that were demolished in Moledan. And now the municipality says this land belongs to us. And the traditional leadership says, the Shivasi says that this land is ours. So in that reality, where are people going to gain the food? Where people are going to hide their heads? We speak of the issue of Ubuntu. Where is Ubuntu? We say, I am an African. Where is the Africanism in that? Another issue is the issue of food that is traditional medicine. Traditional medicine is one of the challenges that is booming, that has showed us in 2020 that as African people, our powers have been taken, and even now, we don't have much power. During COVID-19, people were not allowed to use traditional medicine like umhlonyane. People were told that that medicine is not tested. Even now we have a serious debate scholarly that traditional medicine is not tested. But in reality, there are people that are relying in traditional medicine. Even studies are saying 80% of people day to day, they rely into traditional medicine. Nowadays, with the AI or technology that is booming, we have content creators that some of them, they are even teaching with the importance of traditional medicine. They are teaching with the plants like snake plants, which is Western. Why can't we go to the bushes, or we allow our mushatis to allow us to have these herbs and we document them in our yards? We have Dr. Fru, who is one of the digital content when it comes to traditional medicine. He is teaching people that they should advocate or even plant medicines. In terms of food, in our yards, we are given some small yards, and we are overpopulated because of the land that is a scarcity. If you find in many areas, there are mukukus or extended houses in the backyards. And when you check, there's not even a small space that they can even plant a spinach. I've been to Zimbabwe. I have noted that each and every house in Zimbabwe, they have this spinach called kovu. And that spinach, it's a seasonal, even winter, even summer, they harvest from that. But here in our country, even with the crisis of water, we cannot have such. Because of scarcity of the land, we can have that. We cannot have that. So I am saying that if the issue of climate, the issue of peace, even in our communities, as we can see now in South Africa, I don't know whether we are coming or we are going. There's issue of xenophobic attacks, whereby some other countries, they are even twisting the narrative. Others, they're saying is xenophobia. Some are saying that they're chasing out of the country. But in reality, we speak about the legal documentation of the people that are coming from other countries. And when we look at that issue very closely, we can see that we might have some civil wars. And within us, Africans, why can't we teach, even if we say we have borders, because we're saying we want borderless Africa, why can't we teach our people the importance of staying in peace and harmony? Because I think one of the things that are bringing this issue is the issue of criminality. And the push factor, it might be poverty. Why can't we fight the giant of poverty in the house? In terms of climate, we have a ways, man, of fighting climate change. We have indigenous way of fighting climate change. I have seen around Good Friday when it was raining, some of people were even putting the shoes at the back, saying that they want the rain to stop so that they continue with their groove. Why can't we even digitize some of those mechanisms to stop or even to track some of the natural disasters? Because some of the natural disasters with the animals or with the flora and fauna that we have, we can fast track those things. I remember some weeks back, I was in Mpumalanga, and my grandmother says there will be a serious rain that is coming. It was coming from the blood, a bed. She was saying that this bed, in few or in many years, I never had such. So why can't we sit down and we document such? I think if we can do that, we will fight and win our Africa, and we'll have our Africa better. And the issue, again, that replaced the slave trade, the issue of human traffic, I think is some of the replacement of slave trade. If we can even try to fight that issue, we will win our children back. We will have the drugless Africa. We will have Africa economy, Africa currency, Africa that unites, Africa that stands together.
Thank you. Yeah, you've really said a mouthful, and what I'm taking from what you've just said is that we've got the solutions for most of the challenges that we have on the continent. With that, I'd like to open it up to the audiences. We can only take 5 questions. You can just state who your question is directed to and introduce yourself. Thank you. I think we've got a roaming mic. Big. Oh, okay. Yeah. I've noted the first gentleman on the third. Okay, we can start there actually with the lady and then we can go up. We can start there, that lady in the white. Yes.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Dikhale Zalda, and I have a question directed to the panel. And I'm pointing to the NBA panelist. I'm a community member and a black young entrepreneur. And currency swing from the global conflicts make banks even more risk averse from. So from an NBA perspective, what's one finance model you'll recommend right now to de-risk the lending for women like me, so we viable businesses don't die from collateral rules? Thank you.
I don't know if you want to respond as and when they ask, or should we just take all questions at once? Okay.
Okay.
has a mic?
Oh, they say I should speak, hence I already have a mic. Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. I just would like to quickly, my question can be shared by both Ras and Dr. Mvulu because they are passionate about IKS. So, just to give a quick preface to my question, I follow somebody from on Twitter who wrote a post that never leaves my mind. He seemed to be a proponent of Western positivist science. And he wrote a fierce polemic against the IKS. He says it is unrealistic, it cannot be implemented, and it is intellectually impure. So, and when I tried to argue that person, I realized his strong point is that is why there is no progress of integration of IKS into the laws. And indeed, that is true. Now, as a law student, for me to go back and argue that post, I want you to help me with this question. In advancing the Pan-African agenda of sustainability, how do we make sure that the indigenous knowledge system is not merely appropriated rhetorically, but it is given a real authority in policy formation and resource governance? Perhaps you can provide concrete example and cases where it failed or worked. Thank you.
Oh, it works. Hello.
We can take to the gentleman here. Oh, there's a mic. Somebody has a mic already? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Greetings to everyone. My question is for the panel. I don't have a direct person to select, but this is specifically, my question is specifically for us youth that are in the digital area. So my question is as follows: how can we establish a framework for ethical cultural engagement that moves beyond the common justification of appropriation? Because as a youth member living in the digital area, when we see a person from a different ethnicity incorporating a different culture, we always want to tarnish them and say that, oh, you're appropriating this from our culture, instead of celebrating culture in general. Example, I think also that we can say as an Africans is when it comes to clothing, most of our traditional attire doesn't originate from Africa, or doesn't originate from, it originates from the different African tribes that influenced us. Thank you.
Okay, greetings everyone. My name is Kanyi. I'm from the University of Limpopo Debating Society. So I agree with the statement that says that we are continuing the systems that the oppressor has implemented or put into place, right? So I believe that the problem that we have is not just the uneducation of our artists, but also there is a problem of mental conditioning in our societies and in our educational sector, right? Because we believe that our culture is far inferior to our to the Western counterparts, right? That there is no success or there is no longevity or growth in that specific industry, and that has therefore created this loophole that results in artists being exploited because they don't actually realize their worth or the worth of the industry that they're in. And even us as consumers, right? When we look at cultural products, we do not value their worth, right? But instead, we can spend a lot of money on Western products and have no problem with it. But when it comes to our own cultural products, we have a problem with it when it's priced, let's say, very, not that expensive, but somewhat expensive, right? So how do we therefore address that mental conditioning, not just for artists, but for our society as a whole, right? What are the practical mechanisms that we can implement to address that mental conditioning?
Can we also bring the mic to this gentleman here? He's had his hand up since we started. I'll bring it up there. I know I only said 5 questions. I'll bring it up there. can we just give you an opportunity to ask a question?
Thanks very much, Ms. Mahlangu, for the rescue. My name is Ramoshaba James from the University of Limpopo. I only have 2 questions, and I believe they can be tackled by Advocate Mantula and Dr. Mdluli. Firstly, who benefits from our sustainability agendas? And what interventions are therefore needed to shift these narratives so that we can also benefit from them? And then secondly, in an attempt to move from rhetoric to reality, how can then rural communities and traditional leaders, as custodians of culture, participate meaningfully in development negotiations rather than merely becoming sites of extraction from both local elites and global powers? Thank you very much.
Okay, and then we'll take it to the lady. We'll take it to the second last row. Whoever has the mic can ask the question.
Okay, it's fine. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Makgate Kyogaratile. I'm also part of the University of Limpopo Debating Society and also part of the Pan-African Debating Council as their financial secretary. I have a plethora of questions, but I'll limit them to 3. So firstly...
Keep just one. I've just been told that I have to end the session, so just ask one question, then we'll allow the panel to respond.
Okay, no problem. So they speak about the youth having to bring up solutions in terms of cultural identity, having culture being recognized, not only in South Africa, but also internationally. But the problem that we have is that the youth have solutions, they have ideas, and yet the leadership that we have often keeps on stealing the ideas that they have and executing them in the wrong way, right? Who do we turn to as the youth that have solutions when all our attempts to have a standing of them are often eliminated? Hence why you see majority of the youth now moving away from the platform of having to have political engagement. The last thing that we have is that the University of Limpopo is hosting Khorong 3.0 soon, very, very soon, like 29 June till the 5th of July. That's a platform that majority of the people that are in this room can utilize to bring those solutions and also test them on the stand. When we are bringing such a platform to you guys, what are you willing to do to ensure that you as leaders are also involved in such spaces to ensure that the solutions that we bring forth are then taken into consideration and then implemented?
Thank you for those questions, the thought-provoking questions. I'll bring it back to the panel, starting with the question that the lady asked. Maybe I'll direct it to you, Professor Nwakwe. She's an entrepreneur and she's asking, what can banks do to support them?
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, the lady that asked the question. She started by talking about the how international problems ripple risk into the business sector. And of course, that is the importance of, firstly, taking out insurance early enough, as no business is immune to the shocks that international problems can have on businesses. So even as at now, it is not even late to take up an insurance, but when the risk does occur, in order to proceed further, we need to diversify our investment assets. Do not put your investment in only one single asset, because if you diversify and there is a shock in one investment area, you are going to recoup from other multiplicity of assets that you have invested in. But if you have your investment only in one asset, that is when it can cause havoc. But then we have the banks that can help. Even now, you can approach the banks so that they can create a hedging on some of your assets that are prone to risk. And when such hedges are done, you certainly can recoup and withstand international shocks that can bring a lot of risk to your investments.
And the gentleman, they asked a question on IKS. How do we make sure it's not appropriated? Anybody can answer that. Indigenous knowledge systems, how can we make sure that they're not appropriated?
Okay, in terms of that, I think our communities have lost in terms of their knowledge. I can give you example of the Koi and the San in terms of the Rooibos in terms of Hodia. We should learn from the past. How do we learn from the past? It means us who are knowledgeable, we need to educate people or communities with the issue of intellectual property. And another thing is that not everyone who comes to you and asks you something is genuine. There are some other Western or even us as African as well who take other people's information and make it ours. And because of the resources that we have, we turn it and then we brand it to be ours. Education, I think, is the best so that the knowledge it's not stolen along the way.
For me, I think all knowledges, they are equal. But if there's an undermining of an African knowledge, remember the Eurocentric knowledge was part also of colonial conquest. They use the knowledge. So they will always challenge the African knowledge to say it is not pure, it's not practical. We are sitting with a law in South Africa of 2019. If you look into the promotion and protection of the knowledge management, indigenous knowledge management of 2019, we are struggling with that law. Traditional Healers Practitioners Act, we are struggling also. How do we restore dignity into our traditional medicine in this country? Sustainability, who is determining that? It is us, the users. I think one thing that we have forgotten is that all of us here, we are part of an archive. Our daily lives are an archive. Our families are an archive. Our narratives, the narratives of the young people are archives, and they are also knowledge. There's no need for young people to feel as if they are not being listened to. The young people have their platforms. We had the National Youth Commission in 1994. We have now the National Youth Development Agency. Is it agent? Is it an agency, or is it agent on the youth affairs? So you have to understand that the youth are not the future only, but they are the present. And they should learn from the elders. Because one thing that we have missed in this continent is the intergenerational knowledge transfer that we must stick to. And for me, that's where I look at those areas. And the question of Pan-Africanism, Afrocentrism, global Africa, there have been many philosophers, from Ali Mazrui to people like Falola, people like that have been constantly saying Pan-Africanism is this shifting its lens. It's shifting its focus to look at the basic needs now and the common aspirations. Because once we don't aspire and once we don't inspire, then we cannot perspire. So it's very important for us as young people to have aspirations, to dream earlier, like I said, complicity of imaginations. But don't fall into a trap of a nightmare and a deep sleep as you are dreaming. And secondly, as you engage on a social media, know the limits of social media. It is robotic by nature. It is emotionally draining. Because people who spend more time into social media is not like a person who is on the field planting.
Maybe, Ms. Masango, you can respond to these two questions. I'm combining them because I'm looking at the time. There was a question on youth in the digital era. You know, what opportunities are there, and how do you ensure that the solutions that the youth has and the ideas, who do they tend to? Who do they run those ideas past by?
I think Advocate Mantul has already touched on who, youth can actually turn to. But I would want to also emphasize that youth should form, something themselves, right? The same way that we had some form of, during apartheid, right, youth did have some form of impact into the eradication of the apartheid government, right? So if youth feel like this particular system is not in favor of their own needs, right, this political system is not in favor of their needs, it is then their chance, right? They should then take the baton themselves and try to fight the system, right? They themselves form groups, they themselves form organizations in which they'll be able to vocalize, right, their needs and how they want to shape, the future of the country and how they want to shape policy, because particularly that we are in a democracy, youth does stand a chance, right, to get into parliament. Youth does stand a chance to also inform policy. Youth does stand a chance to also actively participate in politics. So it's just that in the current era where we're living in, youth just tend to not want to participate in politics because they do not know the power that exists within politics. They do not know the power that politics has on economics, right? It's only through politics, only through political intervention, where things like the high unemployment rate, such issues can be eradicated, only through political will, right? And if youth then are in that space of trying to eradicate unemployment, then their needs will then be responded to. Kanye also asked a question about artists being exploited, right? How the system is exploitative in nature, and how there is some form of mental conditioning. I think one thing that should be referenced, and she mentioned something that we've already learned the system. We've already learned the system of the colonizer. We know how the system works, right? We should know the intentions that the colonizer had when they were here. They were here in order to satisfy the capitalist model, satisfy the capitalist order, right? The systems that were built here were meant to benefit the European Industrial Revolution that was taking place when it was transitioning from the medieval time to the capitalist now in place system, right? So the type of systems that are here are systems that are meant to be exploitative in nature, and thus they need reconfiguring. The reconfiguring can only happen through intentional, right, political act. It can only take place when, in this case, if youth feel like they are being exploited, this is this is an area whereas they can try to harden their voice in this area and try to shape the policies around this type of exploitation, eradicate the exploitation in this case.
Thank you for that. Before I ask the last two questions, I'd like to give an opportunity to Prof. Sibanda. He just wants to add on to something that you've just said.
Good afternoon, my apology. I won't take time, but then I wanted to add something on that issue of traditional knowledge system and the law, because we've got Mahoshi and our traditional leaders, and I think they take time to come to these events because they value and they want to understand and appreciate that we do appreciate what is happening on their side. I can tell you, anybody who peddles information that indigenous knowledge system, it is useless or it is waste of time, that particular person is very misplaced. Most of the time, I'll give you an example. Anybody will start a podcast to talk about soccer, and then the person is Siwele Leban talks more about Chiefs. Why? It's because Chiefs generate a lot of hits for that particular person. The same thing with that person will say Western protection really makes sense compared to indigenous or traditional protection. And as I just step off, because I wanted to make this particular point, you look at, I see the rug here in front of us here. It might not be the original or Persian rug or what, but then, I don't know what to call it, the gagasepedi, but it's a rug. Yeah. When you go to the Eastern Europe, Iran, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, those countries, they do have laws, intellectual property laws, that protect the patents, the methodology, and the way of weaving these particular rugs. Not every tomb and Harry. I don't want to can say I'm producing this particular act. And that is all about traditional knowledge. Secondly, I don't know, it's Tigray community in Ethiopia. They have what you call community seed banks. Those banks, basically, if it's a community seed, that's known only to the community. Or let's talk about Mpesu. I don't know what is a seed, but I'm not sure, but I need to use it. Yeah, no, I'm just saying from the seed point of view, community seed banks, those communities, what they do, they have, and those banks are protected. Even from the intellectual property point of view, the seeds are placed there. If you want to use them, you need to go there because they know how to select them. They know what to tell you exactly how to grow and nurture them. And so these are typical example of how these are protected. So we must not think. And the last one, really, in terms of in the then Samoan area in southern Australia, there is a particular medicine, so a particular component that they use in HIV/AIDS, and that is known to be dissected by a particular traditional community. No, they are protected by law. If you are going to use it to produce Western medicine, you still have to pay them, have to get their consent of using them. IKS is alive. It is maybe perhaps that in law faculties across Africa or South Africa, we are not doing enough to mainstream IKS as one of intellectual property modules. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. And as I conclude, maybe just a minute from the panelists, maybe also responding to the question on who actually benefits from the sustainability agenda. A response from each of the panelists, then call it a wrap.
I would say both the government and the artist does share the beneficiation from sustainability agenda. And like I mentioned earlier, if you think about the exports of our indigenous knowledge, creativity in terms of music, in terms of film, there is a lot of foreign revenue that is being generated that goes to the artists, and part of them go to the government. So I think it's an equal beneficiation, but then we need to increase the benefit that goes to the artists, given that the royalty system is not very much comfortable and very much beneficial to the artists. That area we need to increase so that the royalty system can benefit the artists that create those content. Thank you.
Anyone wants to take that as we conclude?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. I think the artists, they were not talking about the singers only. Even on the issue of the clothing, if we can check, we have this Amakosa clothing. I think, Advocate, if I'm not mistaken, that brand also participate internationally. And because those people who are owning Amakosa, they took a stand to say this is our own. So they have a full benefit of that. I think if other artists that are singers, or even those who are fashion designers, if we have fashion designers here, or those who are crafting, they take ownership of what they do, they will benefit a lot. And even our government, those who are coming from government, you should take this one as a food for thought, but not for the stomach. That they should also make sure that they pay the artists because they come with their knowledge, they come with creativity, and at the end of the day, you find that you get 30% and the government go away with 70%. That will create poverty, that will create economic instability, and going forward, we'll lose a lot of artists, even youth. They will not take it serious because they are not benefiting. Thank you so much.
So if I heard the question properly, it talks about the sustainability agenda in terms of culture. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So the sustainability agenda in terms of culture right? And I'm trying to broaden this onto a lens of an international political lens, right? Who actually benefits from a sustainability agenda of culture. And one thing that came to mind was currently the custodian of soft power in the international system is the USA. And provided that the USA, through the implementation of soft power, has then managed to attain much of the economic wealth that it has realized currently, right? So I am trying to center this into the African context, and I can say this in the African context. If we are in a position where we redefine, right, our identity, find footing in the international system, right? Provided that we find footing in the international system, then we can be able to vocalize our identity, and through that identity will lead to a spreading of soft power. There are many benefits that we can attain through soft power. We can attract international investors into our continent, right? Multiple industries can receive multiple immense funding, right, in order to grow certain industries within Africa. So it's only through this goes to the creatives, right, of soft power, the creatives which are the ones that implement culture, or which are the ones that actually ensure the widespread of culture. Culture has an immense impact in international politics. If we can find some form of footing, if we can find some form of identity within the international system, right, then we will be able to also reap some certain rewards through soft power. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I think on my end, I'll just use 3 words. I'll say cultural renaissance, cultural revolution, cultural reclamation, and using the power of our knowledge. If we use those, we will be able to attain what we want. And once we want to relegate economy only to high manufacturing, culture is also part of economy. It is also a creator of jobs. Is how do we manage it? And that's where I will want to end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for our panelists. And with that, I hand over the baton to the program director. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much for driving this part of the program. And due to the interest of time, I'm going to move straight to the next item and invite Professor Matsebandela, Professor and Chairperson for the Global Leadership and Sustainability Symposium. And he will be ushered by the cultural group, the Nyungubiseni Cultural Society. As he comes, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I think we should appreciate the cultural dance. Without wasting any time, I think we are behind time, as quick as possible. My name is Tanyani Mazivandira. I work here at TGSL. I think I just want to give few highlights in terms of what we're doing today, and then also talk about the next events that we're going to have in relation to the dialogue that we're having today. I just want to start with the words by Julius Nyerere, which were repeated by Thandika Mkandawira, where he talks about Africa is running while others walk. And of course, they were talking about the challenges that Africa faces, which other countries might, or other continents might have faced before, but we are still facing even today. So trying to sum up the discussions that we had today, I can start by mentioning some of the challenges that were mentioned, and I'll end with some of the solutions that are related to the discussions that we were having this afternoon. So Africa needs to unite in order to navigate the current realities and the uncertainties that we see in the day-to-day of our lives. We need to ask ourselves, how can Africa thrive in the midst of the complex global turmoils and crises, as the crisis that we see in Iran and Israel? The crisis that we face affects everyone from global community, African continent, South Africa, its regions and its communities. So everyone is facing different challenges, and we need to find a way to respond to these challenges. There are contemporary challenges, of course, which have added to the challenges that we already face. Issues of climate change, issues of technological disruptions. We cannot overemphasize those challenges. Currently, we are facing floods. Even in Limpopo, we have been facing floods since last year. Something that I think the last floods that we really faced, it was in 2000. But now, for an extended period, even this week, there are still people who are facing such floods. So what is it that we need to do to respond to this? Other challenges, of course, we can say they are self-inflicted by the leaders that we elect ourselves, because they tend to seek to represent themselves other than representing communities. And that will not lead to any development that will be sustainable. Of course, conflicts in Africa have created a derail in the path towards self-actualization. And that, of course, has led to issues that we were talking about earlier, issues of xenophobia, because at the end of the day, it seems like we don't really know who we are. We always see the next person as an enemy. And also, that has an impact. And the issues of power of diversity in terms of culture is what we need in order to understand that we all can contribute something to the development of Africa. Conflicts within and across countries create a strain in which development cannot be realized. Issues of military coups, issues of military takeover, issues of ethnic conflicts and so on continue to have an impact in Africa. Other challenges which limits cultural development and also which limits the monetary value around cultural development. We talked about issues of corruption, issues of lack of knowledge, and also government not doing enough to promote cultural beneficiation for those who are participating in these processes. These are some of the things that I think we need to look at in relation to what was discussed today. We need to use education in order to develop the future that we dream of and beyond. We need to promote diversity so that we can be able to promote different economic activities to cater for job creation and also to seek for the future that our kids need to have. Africa should find ways to establish trust and understanding to allow for flow of goods and services, including the people, to create space for innovation flow, issues of development and also sustainable development within Africa. We should find ways to move beyond what we have lost, to always complain about the past, to find ways to create spaces for intellectual, cultural benefits. Of course, in self-actualization, for example, one of the discussants talked about South Africa joining BRICS as one of the strides towards moving beyond just being dependent on the West in terms of development. Of course, I already talked about the issue of cultural diversity, which constitute opportunity to grow African continent beyond its imagination, it being food, it being cultural innovation, it being local technologies. Our offerings should align and cater for communities beyond our own, but also serve in the global platforms. We should be able to protect our cultural creations and avoid creating space for appropriation of our richness out of the IKS that we have been talking about and also other cultural related benefits. We should take advantages of renewable energy, natural resources that we have in the country. We should also take advantage of cultural and heritage tourism, minerals that we have, and other diverse offerings that we have in Africa in order to develop ourselves. We can play a big role in emancipating the black child and create opportunities for job creation, entrepreneurship, and also innovation. One of the things that we are doing currently, which we established at one of the events like this last year, is that we are talking with the Cogstar in Limpopo about establishment of innovation hubs within rural areas. So we're talking about how to come up with rural innovation hubs so that different innovations that we find in rural areas, they can be realized and commercialized to create employment opportunities. And we are doing that. There's already one traditional leader that we are talking to in Venda who is keen to offer some spaces where we can have these innovation hubs. In terms of what we are going to do next, one of the things that we thought about when we started the symposium last year was that we wanted to create spaces for discussions like this, but we need to go beyond just discussions. So our next activity before the symposium, we are talking with Polokwane municipality. That's why Tate Kabi is here. We're talking with Polokwane municipality to look at what is it that we can do to conscientize people in terms of how do they respond to the floods that we are facing at the moment. So it will be sort of an educational campaign. We're also talking to SABC so that whatever we'll be discussing can be also be heard in radios, SABC radios in the province. So we're still talking, but it's something that we are thinking is important so that we can respond to the realities as they are happening, other than just only having the discussions. And that activity, we're planning it for July, before the symposium that we are going to have in August. So our symposium, we are collaborating with colleagues from Iowa State University in the USA. Some of them will come here, they will share some of the ideas that they have that they are using, developing their communities that side. So it's going to be a vibrant activity, the 19th and the 20th of August, here at TGSL. the call for abstracts is already out. If you have not sent your abstract, please do send so that you can come and share your research that you have done. And also we can see what is it that we can do to influence not just the discussions, but also the policies that government needs to implement to take us forward. Lastly, I just want to say that we need to work together to achieve the best of what has been bestowed upon us. In Venda, we have a concept of munwe muti autusi matutu, which means one finger could not pick, I don't know if we can say popcorn or something like that, but which means you can't do things by yourself. We need to work together to take our communities forward, to create opportunities that will bring about sustainable development that we have been talking about for some time now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof, for being able to briefly synthesize the discussions that took place, as well as throwing forward to what we can expect in terms of the symposia that you're running throughout the year. I think Ras Mantula will be happy that we are aspiring to inspire as we perspire before we expire. So we are on the right track. But as my parting shot, as I invite a vote of thanks, Prof. Madaj, everything that they discuss here, it's really boiling down to interdisciplinarity. And I think maybe as a university, we might consider in our program qualification mix adding a qualification on scholars who are able to negotiate their way around all these issues at a go from a single qualification. We might be taking a very good step in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, let me invite the program manager for MDEF as well as the convener for this dialogue, the Global Leadership and Sustainability Symposium. Let us appreciate Ntate Njogo.
Thank you, Program Director. It is a great honor for me to be given the opportunity to give the vote of thanks because, as you know, as the convener, most of you are here because of me. It is my responsibility as the convener to make sure that we have an audience. And it is the responsibility of the chairperson, Prof. Matsibandile, to make sure that you are scientifically sound. Without wasting time, I think from today's dialogue, what we have seen is that our university is committed to fostering inclusive academic spaces that celebrate Africa Month, but also that celebrate our diversity as Africans, not just as South Africans, but in all our brightness as Africans. And also that celebrates in our African identity and heritage. You know, it might look small, but when we put on the call, or when we put in the invitations that as part of celebrating Africa Month, the dress code will be African prints. It might look small to you, but such small things are very important to us if we are to celebrate who we are fully. I want to thank the Vice Chancellor and Principal in absentia, and I want to thank the executive management represented by Prof. Madaji. Thank you, Prof, for being here. Your presence is very important to us, and the support is very important to us. From our faculty, Prof. Sibanda, our executive dean, and our research professor, Prof. Sitate, thank you again. We are supported by the university and our faculty, and that is why we keep on delivering at the level we are delivering. And I then want to thank our keynote, my brother, Advocate Mantula. Ngiyabonga kakhulu ukuhlonipha isimemo sami. Akuzange kuthathe isikhathi ukuthi mina nawe sibone usuku oluzosilungela ukuthi senze lo mcimbi. Kuyintokozo kimi ukuthi ugcine ufikile. And again to thank Usisi Nonhlanhla again through collaborations with the Mail and Guardian. That's how I reached her. Nakuwe sisi ngiyabonga kakhulu. Bungangazi kodwa wangithemba ukuthi hayi akusona isigebengu lesi, that there is an actual event that the university is doing. So thank you for moderating this panel. And to our panelists, thank you again. I know it took time, the work needed for you to prepare, because Advocate Mantula does not believe in speeches, so panels then find it difficult because of that. Thank you for taking the time and for being here. Our program director, Ntate Morera, thank you for giving me a break. It is appreciated, and hopefully we'll continue with this collaboration between ourselves as we deliver these events. And I want to thank our colleagues from marketing, the whole marketing and communications. What a stellar job from the programs in front of you to have they've delivered. They don't drop the ball. And I just want to give an appreciation. If colleagues can just give an appreciation to marketing and communications. Yeah, that's my team. That's the people that I do a lot of back and forth with until we get it to the standard that it deserves. And I want to thank again our stakeholders and guests who are here. I would no longer mention them by names because they've been mentioned. But I want to thank you. And in thanking you, I want to also say this is what we can do by ourselves. So imagine what we can do in collaboration and with your support for the symposium. So this dialogue and the one we hosted in February are one of the things we are presenting to you to say, this is what the university can do on its own, but imagine how significant and how impactful it would be if we all came together. So thank you in all your different offices and divisions. I don't want to miss anyone, but I want to thank you. And then to thank our colleagues from the support staff to the academic staff who are here. Thank you very much to the HODs who allowed some of the tests to be later or earlier. Thank you very much. And most importantly, thank you to our students. Without you, we do not have these dialogues. As has been said, you are the future. We are doing these to, so that you are informed, so you are informed leaders. You don't leave the university and, and people ask, where did you graduate? Because they are not seeing the scholarly in you. They start to doubt that does this person even have a degree? So we are doing them for you so that when you go out there, you represent the brand very well. And thank you. And again, thanks to everyone, to our colleagues from TGSL. Thank you for the late evenings we've been doing to make sure that this event is a success. It is much appreciated. To the organizing committee, my team and Prof. Matibandila's team, we thank you very much. And we are looking forward to seeing you at the symposium in August. And those stakeholders who are here and have not sent sponsorship letters to, you will be receiving yours. And to our partner, leader, the colleagues are here. Those we have signed a marriage with leader. The previous dialogue, our elders, it was Mahadi, so it was agreed in the marriage. So I'm glad that you came here. When you visit your in-laws for the first time after the marriage. So now you can see that we are a stable family that you are safe with. So we are looking forward to working with you. So thank you, colleagues, and drive safe. Our program director will then give us directions from here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Banele and Jogo, for thanking us. I must thank you for thanking us, and also for convening us, and thank everyone for being able to be convened. And from myself as well, Moses Mrerwa, thank you so much for lending me your ear. From here, we have lunch organized for everybody. Unfortunately, our canteen is not that big to take all of us. So we're going to request the guests and staff to head to the cafeteria. We have ushers, they will assist in terms of conducting. And students, all of you, kindly remain in the auditorium. The meal is the same, don't worry. It's just an issue of the capacity of the venue that site. So they will bring the lunch to all of you here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This brings the event to a close. Ke a leboga.